We're coming into the last poll closing of the night, coming up on 11 p.m. Eastern. In Washington State, residents there vote by mail. If you choose, so everybody gets sent a ballot so that you can return by mail. If you choose, instead of mailing in your ballot, you can take your ballot to a drop box or to a voting center. And if you do that, you have until 8 p.m. local time to do that. 8 p.m. local time is 5 seconds ago. So in Washington, there's a bunch of interesting races to watch. We're in terms of Democratic Party machinations, we've been watching the Democratic member of Congress, Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. She's sort of an outspoken centrist, kind of an idiosyncratic, interesting Democratic member of Congress. She's facing primary challengers in her southwestern Washington state district. It's an R+2 district. Trump narrowly won that district in 2024. She's narrowly won that race twice. So we'll be watching that. Washington is also a state where we've got the top two candidates advancing to the general election, regardless of which party they are in. So we'll be having a look at those Washington results when we are first starting to get them. We are still very closely, though, watching the Senate race in Michigan as the Democratic primary in the Michigan Senate race continues to be a real nail-biter. The polling in this race shifted over time. It sort of made people think that there was going to be a really big difference in the early vote as compared to the same-day vote. But I think a lot of the prognostication on this one is falling by the wayside as we now just have to watch the actual vote come in. And what you see on the right side of your screen here is an interesting factor. We've got 42% of the vote here overall. You see how tight it is between Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens. But on the right side of your screen there, that is Mallory McMorrow, who was in this race until July 5th when she dropped out, but she is still on the ballot. And pulling 3.7% of the vote is no way to get yourself elected senator. But it is an interesting factor that may become really operative in terms of us understanding the dynamics of this race as they come in. Right now, the difference, she's got 22,861 votes. Mallory McMorrow, again, she's not still in the race. Look at the difference between Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens. It's 20,000 votes. So in a close race, every single vote can matter, and quirky dynamics in 2/3-way races can be potentially determinative.
Yeah, and your point on the polling, I mean, polling primaries is always difficult because you're modeling an electorate, and those modeling assumptions make a huge difference. The last 5 or 6 polls that we saw, like high-quality polls in this race, had Abdul El-Sayed up by double digits plus.
Yeah.
I think at this point in the evening, we can say pretty definitively that will not be the margin. And I think that has actually a pretty important implication because whoever wins this is going to win a pretty close race between these two candidates. It's not going to be a romp. And that's going to have implications for how whoever it is wins kind of figures out how to stitch that coalition back together to take on Mike Rogers in the fall. And I do think it's different coming out of a narrow win than a big win in terms of what's going through your head about how much do I need to talk to the folks tonight at the podium, for instance, or tomorrow, if it's tomorrow, that didn't vote for me. And I think that's actually now very much in the air for either of these candidates.
I'm struck by you talking about the need for whoever wins this on the Democratic side to stitch that coalition together. And as we're speaking to folks at home, I'm speaking to some of those in the room on both sides, including inside the White House right now. And a Trump ally, I think you're getting our preview of what it's going to look like in the fall. Again, it doesn't matter what happens tonight. It matters what happens in November. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this Trump ally, someone who is close to the president, in his ear on nights like this, so there's a preview of what Twitter may look like tomorrow, mind you, saying that they are focused on exploiting, they will be focused on exploiting those differences, the divisions that we're witnessing as we speak and have been talking about right now among Democrats, obviously. So on the one hand, you have the Democrats who they only got a few months to try to, as you say, stitch it back together. At the same time, the Republicans, Trump land, will be looking to do everything they can to sort of amplify this.
It's not unlike the Republicans don't have something to exploit on their side, too. Republicans have delivered absolutely squat to the people of Michigan over the last 2 years, except high gas prices, a lack of access to health care, and a whole bunch of other decisions that Mike Rogers is going to have to carry into this general election.
And in electoral terms, they've delivered to the people of Michigan the same Senate candidate who lost the last Senate race in Michigan against Alyssa Slotkin.
Exactly. That's
Possibly
exactly
the same gubernatorial candidate who's lost twice statewide as well.
And so while that is their space, they're going to do exactly what Peter said. And so to shift the argument to say, look at all the commies on the left. And look at all the scary things you need to focus on the left.
You're right.
That's why I want to go back to something that Ali Vitale said that is very, very important, where she posited this framing of, this either or. Do I turn out my base voters? Right? Simone and I can talk about turning out that base vote. Or do I turn out the folks who don't vote? Let me tell you what I did. I turned out both. Because politics is not a zero-sum game if you want to win. And the Democrats have to ask themselves, I don't give a damn who the nominee is at this point in the game. You got to zero in on the bottom line. Do you want to win this race? Because all the indicators, the leading indicators are there that you can.
Also, I want to say Mike Rogers in a kind of resume way, makes sense as a sort of normie Republican in that state.
House Intelligence Committee.
House Intelligence Committee, and a kind of, again, both, he's MAGA because everyone's MAGA now, but he wasn't really MAGA, so he has some sort of old Romney-style pedigree. He had an interview with Semaphore the other day, and they asked him, what his position were on the tariffs. He couldn't come up with it. About the Iran war, he said, I don't care. He goes, well, I care, but it's not really what I'm hearing about. It's man, you're going to, again, this goes in both directions. You're going to have to answer for the tariffs. You're going to have to answer for for Todd Blanche. You're going to have to answer for the war in Iran. You're going to have to answer for gas prices. You're going to have to answer for grocery prices. You better get a thing together. Now, you can rant about
scot-free right now on that, because all of the money that's been spent thus far in the primary has been spent between the Democratic candidates. And so Mike Rogers just walking around here like Mr. Rogers in the neighborhood. I don't care. And
you should care.
He should care.
I think you should care.
To the point that Peter was making about the coming together, it is not easy to come together this close to the general election. It'll be less than 90 days. It's a late primary. In Texas, they still trying to come together in the Democratic primary. Tallarico is still struggling, too. You asked him the question about black voter support. He did a town hall the other day with black voters, trying to talk to them about their issues.
The thing he's working hardest on in his campaign.
And he will need to. So if El Sayed is the nominee, even if Haley Stevens is the nominee, I've talked to people in Michigan that have said, look, they both have terse support, and they both have work to do in the black community. This looks like this primary is coming down to what voters in Wayne County, specifically voters in Detroit, specifically black voters, because Western Wayne County is white. So what are voters in Detroit going to do? What are they talking about? And that's what I'm looking for.
By the way, not for nothing, the biggest billboard we saw as we drove to Saginaw, 100 miles northwest of Detroit yesterday and back, was the giant gas price signs everywhere. $4.36, I think it is today, the highest it has been since May, up 13% in the last week. You can talk about all the campaign signs that you want and all these things that are outside of homes, but that's what people see every day right now. Whatever you say about a more normal Republican candidate, that's something that Republicans are going to have to answer for, and certainly going to have to answer for it in Michigan.
And I will just say a little peek behind the curtain for our viewers here. In talking to our election unit today, in terms of how MS Now as a network views this Senate contest and the effort by Democrats and Republicans to try to retain control for the Republicans or seize control of the Senate for the Democrats, this race, this Senate race for November in Michigan is viewed by MS Now, by our nonpartisan experts, as a toss-up race. If Haley Stevens wins tonight, or if Abdul El Sayed wins tonight, it will still tomorrow be a toss-up Senate race in the fall, according to our, again, nonpartisan expert prognosticators. And now that may change when we see how whoever the nominee is, what happens with the polling. We see how the campaigns shape up from Mr. Rogers, as you put it, and from the eventual Democratic nominee. But there's nothing intrinsic about this choice that connects definitely to the question of electability, absent the way the campaign unfolds from here on out. And so I think voters can try to game that out. And we know they have to try to stitch these two things together, but there's nothing magic about either one of these candidates that makes this an easier fight.
No. And I think that, look, I'm so glad we made the point about the polls, because me and Michael Steele, we never, I was like, what you mean 15, 20. What are y'all drinking and eating and smoking over there in the poll situation? This was always going to be closer. And so I do think that there's been this advent as of recently in the last 2 cycles of these less news organizations aren't doing as much polling anymore. Polling costs money. It is expensive. And so you've got some of these independent entities that start doing polling. And if they're not putting out their top lines, if they're not looking at, if we're not clear about who is behind, who's pushing the polling, it can look like what happened in that Texas race where all these polls said Jasmine Crockett was definitely they pushed her into the race, and come to find out after the fact through good reporting that those were Republican-backed polling entities that put the polls out there to encourage her to get into the race to get the candidate that they wanted. And so I think, again, polls do not vote, people vote. So it's always important to talk to people on the ground, which is why I thought it was so amazing what you were doing out there. I watched all the stuff. I'm like, come on, focus group.
What's amazing to me is I used to be peppering you with questions back in the day.
Pete Alexander
and
set
that
a
was side by
hard
side sitting on
Q&A.
this big fancy set here in New York. It's a good gig.
One Between Powers, activate. Ali Velshi is looking at Michigan right now. Overall, we've got how much in the state? 45%.
45% in. Abdul Sayed is just straddling the 50% line. He was a little above it a few moments ago. Now he's back below it. The lead's about the same, though. It's still about 23,500 votes here, but we are seeing these numbers coming in. They're coming in all over the state. You can see there are very few counties where we don't have vote in, and in the areas with a lot of population, Flint, Lansing, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Traverse City, Ann Arbor, Detroit, we've got lots of vote in. In Wayne County, 26% of the vote is in. Haley Stevens still in the lead. Remember, we went from sort of 6% to 25%, and Haley Stevens took the lead. She was running almost 2/3 to 1/3. Her margin is dropping in and around Detroit. She now has a 15,000 point lead, 15,000 vote lead in Wayne County. Now, Wayne County is Detroit and other things. In Detroit, this part of it over here, there's a little section here. That's Hamtramck, and next to it is Highland Park. In these two places, we do not have vote yet. This is important because Hamtramck, like Dearborn is the old Ford plant, which attracted a lot of immigrant workers, where Abdul Sayed has done well. Hamtramck, like that, has also got a large South Asian community. We have not seen voting come in from Hamtramck yet, or from Highland Park. These are the only two areas within the city of Detroit where we haven't seen any vote at all yet. In both cases, they are likely to favor Abdul El-Sayed, but he is at the moment trailing in Wayne County by 15,000 votes. So he is winning in 3 of the counties around Wayne, losing in the one below it. Above it in Macomb, he's winning, but that's again only 34% of the vote in. And below Detroit is Monroe County, 20% of the vote in, the 5% spread between Haley Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed. So this is a real nail-biter. We still have 800,000 Democratic votes to count in Detroit, and the spread across the state is under 25,000 votes. So it's not clear to anybody how this is going to turn out. I think you make an interesting point, though. This is a swing state, Rachel, and regardless of what happens, it's still going to be a swing state tomorrow or Thursday or Friday. On Friday, there is a unity rally. Mallory McMorrow has said she will be there to support whoever wins. Haley Stevens has said she will support the winner, hoping that it's her, with her full force. And last night I talked to Abdul El-Sayed and asked him whether he will be attending that rally and supporting Haley Stevens if she wins, and he said yes. So they understand that it's August, not February like Texas. It's August now, and they've got work to do.
Ali, while we are staying in Michigan, I want to take a look at Washington in a second. But before we leave Michigan, can we look at the 7th congressional district again? This is incumbent Republican Tom Barrett.
Yes.
Trump won this seat, won this congressional district very, very narrowly in the last election.
Yep.
And we've got this interesting 3-way Democratic race here. What have we got so far?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting case. You had Bridget Brink, who, as you mentioned, was the former charge d'affaires, the ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. We hadn't had one for a while, by the way. She was then put into place under President Biden. Donald Trump comes in. She doesn't agree with Trump's policies, so she resigns, and she decides to run in a very moderate lane and has a resume that makes a whole lot of sense to get elected to Congress. something happened, and Matt Masden gets into the race. He's supported by the state senator, the junior senator from Michigan, Alyssa Slotkin. There seems to be some overlap between Masden's staff and Alyssa Slotkin. They've split what appears to be the moderate vote. William Lawrence, who's one of the founders of the Sunrise Organization and coming in from the left, is now at 42%. This has been moving around all night. Bridget Brink's been doing generally a little bit better, but we're basically settling into a place with 54% in. We're not in a position to call this, but William Lawrence is leading and has been leading all night. And the more moderate vote in a district that you said Donald Trump carried narrowly has been split between two other candidates. It's an interesting one to watch.
Super interesting. We'll keep eyes on that. Again, 54% of the vote in there. Let's jump all the way across the country to Washington State. Tell us what we are looking for there. I know that there's a few congressional districts there.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to the one that I want to show you. Let me see. Where is it? I'm just going to work my way around the map until I find it. Let's go. There we go. 3. That's what I'm looking for. All right. This is 58% in. This is the 3rd district in Washington. It's a brand new board, by the way. I'm still getting used to it tonight, but it's new. It's brighter colors.
Responsive.
It's very responsive.
It's great.
Arguably too responsive. No, it's fantastic. It's actually really nice. I'm just getting used to it. We have an incumbent, Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. This is a really interesting story. Chris was talking about it a little earlier. 58% of the vote in. Now, the way it works in Washington is that the top 2 will go on to the election. She's got a lead of 680 votes. This has been flipping back and forth between her and Josh Braun for a large part of the night. Again, no call has been made by the Associated Press as to which 2 are going to move ahead, but you can sort of see from the math here with 58%, it's likely going to be these 2 facing off against each other. She got elected as a more moderate voice within the Democratic Party. She's not been facing a challenge, a meaningful challenge from the left, but this is going to go to, and this will be an interesting election to watch on election night.
Yeah, this is, I mean, so Gluesenkamp Perez, she's the co-chair of the Blue Dog Coalition. Yep. She's a centrist. I would describe her more as a centrist than a moderate.
I think that's right.
In terms of her policy positions and her interests and everything. But she's served 2 terms, and both of those races that she won, for both of those terms, she beat Joe Kent.
Yes.
She beat the former Green Beret who ended up becoming a senior counterterrorism official for Trump. And he was seen,
who then resigned, yeah.
And who then resigned in protest over the Iran war. And he's seen as not at all a moderate, was seen even as on the bleeding edge of MAGA, but he got very close to her in the general election twice. Now, this John Braun, who's polling very well against Gluesenkamp Perez in this primary, but again, it's Washington State, so no matter what party you're in, the top 2 candidates advance to the general. He's not a Joe Kent. He is seen as a more moderate Republican. He's the Republican state Senate leader in Washington State. So it'll be really interesting to see how Gluesenkamp Perez runs against him.
She also, I just think she's an interesting member of Congress because, again, everyone's got to figure out how to represent their district, and they all got to figure out how do I square me and what my personality is in my district. And she's in one of the sort of most imperiled Democratic seats in terms of a Democrat representing a Trump district.
Yeah, anywhere in the country.
She has taken up the cause of onerous nutritional inspections and food safety regulations in daycares, which have made it difficult for them to serve like fresh fruit. Headlights being too bright on cars, which I agree with. She and her husband actually have an auto mechanic shop. And also really, really on the scourge of sea lions overrunning her district. There are too many of them. Yeah.
And just because we're on the topic, the Associated Press has just advanced her to the general election. Marie Gluesenkamp Perez will advance and be the Democratic candidate in November. And you'll remember, Chris, when we used to interview her before she ran, and the various times she ran, she'd often do it from the auto shop.
Yes.
And actually, we've got 2 calls.
We have both calls. There we go. So Josh Braun and Marie Gluesenkamp Perez are going to be advancing to the election.
And of course, the big loser in this election is the Sea Lions.
Yeah.
Justice for the Sea Lions. Can I just say this primary challenge that she had, I think it just puts an interesting question on the table that Democrats are going to have to continue to ask, not just throughout the rest of this year, but next year in advance of more elections that are becoming that we'll be watching for the presidential and down. When is a primary challenge from the left constructive, and when does it risk weakening a candidate? And, you know, there are people, the activists, they don't like the congresswoman. Let's just be very clear. They don't. That's why they were primarying her. They don't think she's a good Democrat or progressive enough. But that is particularly why she holds the seat that Republicans feel like they should hold in that state. And so I don't know if this was good politics, but it definitely made it interesting.
Well, we should say that the structure of the primary here helped her, right?
Yes,
because it
for
was a
sure.
top two. She didn't have that sort of contained primary electorate. But what we saw in Maine in Jared Golden's district, now Jared Golden, who, like Mary Gluesenkamp-Perez, represents in the top tier of Democrats representing Trump districts. He's retired. Part of the reason he's retired is because he said he's sick of politics. But he was also facing a progressive primary challenge, which was going to be expensive and a pain. And
he thought would weaken him.
And he thought would weaken him, and he just got out of town. There is a progressive who won that and is now locked in a battle with Paula Page, a great Rachel Maddow recurring character, I have to say.
Yes.
Hours and hours.
Don't start me on Paula Page.
Oh, I know. I know. In the
cannot
Rachel
stop.
Maddow extended universe, this is. You've got another race. He's back. You got it.
Sorry, I'm actually peeking right now. You should be left alone.
But again, I think, and one of the things I think I will say to this is, look, we're not seeing. I mean, you know, there wasn't some big left challenge to Sherrod Brown in Ohio.
No.
Right? And the primary in Iowa was not particularly ideological that Josh Turek emerged from. There was not some huge organized effort to knock out Mary Peltola in Alaska. So, like, there has been a little bit of, I think there's some strategic sense that suffuses people.
And that Chuck Schumer isn't that. I mean, sometimes his picker has been good, and sometimes the picker has been off.
Right.
I think
also
that
true.
you know,
If you get
two
someone
things
early
are
who
true.
clears the
talk
field.
about strategery later.
Chris Jansen is standing by at Abdul Al-Sayed headquarters in Detroit tonight. We're going to take a quick break. We'll check in with her on the other side of this very quick break. Stick with us here on MS Now as our primary night coverage continues with so much juicy stuff still to come. See you in a minute. All right, we're getting in results from Michigan right now, and we've got a couple of really interesting things going on in some congressional races. First of all, look at this in the 7th district. This is a swing district that's held by an incumbent Republican congressman named Tom Barrett. Tom Barrett is facing a Democratic challenge that is worth paying attention to in November because this is a very, very swing district. Trump did win this district, but only barely. Again, this is Michigan's 7th congressional district. Do we have the board there? I think we do. Michigan 7. Thank you. This is the Democratic primary this is the Michigan Senate Democratic primary. Hopefully we'll get the 7th district. All right, well, let's talk about this. 50% of the vote in the Democratic Senate primary. You can see how close that is. All right, back to this one. All right, okay. 7th Congressional District. Look, there has been a call in this case. We were just talking about this with Ali Velshi at the board. This was a three-way Democratic primary between Bridget Brink, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Matt Masdam, who is a retired Navy SEAL who worked in the Obama White House, who had the endorsement of Alyssa Slatkin, who used to hold this seat, and then this young man, William Lawrence, who's a co-founder of the very interesting, very radical Sunrise Movement, activist movement, climate change activists. He had an endorsement from Abdul Al-Sayed and also from Bernie Sanders, and he has prevailed. You see Brink and Masdam kind of splitting what I think reductively might be described as the moderate vote here, and William Lawrence will be the Democratic nominee in the 7th Congressional District in Michigan. Do we have the board for the 8th Congressional District in Michigan? Now, the 8th Congressional District in Michigan, the Democrat here is an incumbent. In the 8th Congressional District, the incumbent is Kristen McDonald-Rivet, and she is running for re-election. This is also a swing district. Again, in the 8th Congressional District in Michigan, Kristen McDonald-Rivet holds that seat right now. I think she won with about 51% of the vote the last time around, and this is definitely seen as potential Republican pickup. But something interesting has happened in the Republican primary in this 8th Congressional District in Michigan, which is that Trump made an endorsement in this Republican primary in Michigan 8. He endorsed a man named Amir Hassan. And when Trump made that endorsement, another major candidate in the race on the Republican side, Thomas Smith, got out of the race. But as of right now, I don't know if we can show this board or not, if this is just a mirage, in the congressional district, the 8th congressional district in Michigan, Tom Smith, this retired engineer from GM, who got out of the race. He suspended his race on July 16th. Look, he's got 51% of the vote.
He doesn't even have a picture, bro.
He missed school photo day.
You know
So Trump endorsed Amir Hassan in this race. This is a third of the vote in. This is a gettable district for Republicans. At least they'd like to think so. Again, Kristen McDonald-Rivet is the Democratic incumbent here. But despite Trump's endorsement and despite Tom Smith getting out of the race, Tom Smith appears to be doing very well for himself in this congressional district. This appears to be a Republican primary gone haywire. Michael Steele earlier was describing the Democratic Party benefiting in Michigan from the Republican Party apparently having its pants on backwards.
Oh, yes.
Not being able to get anything straight in any of its marquee primaries, let alone these lesser watched, lower on the ballot races. But this is a mess for them.
Pants on backwards, and they're tight. And they're tight because they are hurting some people right now. And this is a very good example of a party that has imploded over the last year or so. There's no organizational structure. There's no discipline. There's no discipline. It's critical.
Why did the Michigan Republican Party implode?
Because it was all about the money and the power grab. Who's up, who's down, who has access to the White House, who's in favor with Trump. You know, the Trumpers in the Michigan Party wanted to run the party, and you know, the mainstays, the folks who've done the battles and been in the wars, you know, they're like, no, we're not going to win because this is Michigan.
Didn't they have like a two popes situation?
They had like
for a while?
yes,
Oh,
they did.
yeah,
Yes,
that's right.
yes,
Like
they had two chairmen. They had an
Two
African
people
American
claiming
woman.
to be chairman.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. And so they went through this whole thing. They never cleaned out all the pipes from that. Because as you know, in politics, things get stopped up and messed up, and it doesn't work its way through the system. And people on the ground still have hard feelings about what happened. And so people aren't working, people aren't helping, they're not organizing. And so you have a candidate who they don't even have a picture for. All right?
Who's not in the race
Who's
anymore.
not in the race at 50.9%.
Over the Trump endorsed candidate who sent in his picture.
Exactly.
Well, you know what happens in that situation now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if the no picture gentleman wins, if it holds, then because he has withdrawn but his name is still on the ballot, I think under Michigan law it becomes a vacancy in nomination, and so the party will then select the nominee.
And that's when the fun will ensue again.
Yes.
Can I say something about this race, this Will Lawrence race? So, you know, Will Lawrence is clearly the most progressive candidate, right, in this race. Now, he was the subject of one of my favorite Super PAC attack ads of the entire cycle, which I think sort of, to me, illustrates what I find sort of insidious about the way Super PACs have come to operate in these primaries. It was the Crush MAGA PAC, which was sort of associated with the kind of Democratic Party leadership that didn't want the most progressive candidate winning in a primary for a swing seat, which, again, that's not a crazy idea strategically. But what they did was they tried to attack him as like a fake progressive, and they ran an ad that says he invested thousands with Wall Street big oil and data centers. Now he has a $10,000 retirement account.
Total.
He has $10,000 total retirement.
He's also like 14 years old.
He's very young.
Yes.
But the point, here's why I want to put a fine point on this. The point wasn't to say to voters, hey guys, this guy is too left for this district. It's a bad idea to nominate him. No, instead it was to try to trick voters into being like, no, he's secretly a sellout. You really want the progressive person. It's not that guy who invests in big oil.
Yeah.
And I think there's something just really insidious about trying to trick voters with Super PAC money, which is not to say to come in and be like, hey, here's my argument on the issue of the day.
Yeah.
I think we saw this in the New York race where the guy who wanted to regulate AI was getting attacked by the AI Super PAC for being in bed with AI. It's like, no, you wait a second. That's not what you actually think.
This is what anonymous money.
Yes,
in politics
you should
does.
make your arguments to people straightforwardly. You should say, guys, he's too left for the district. Or in the case of the Abdul Sayed, we think his policies on Israel are bad. He is not supportive enough of Israel. Instead of everyone going around and sort of using this Super PAC money to make these sort of arguments that they don't actually even believe in to try to trick voters, and what you end up with in this case is that Will Lawrence has won the district.
Yeah.
Now,
So,
I would
like,
argue Super
make
PACs
the
also need some
argument.
better strategists because
Make the
that
argument.
argument is not, it's clearly not informed by the people in the district.
Yeah, just-
because if you were informed by the people in the district, you would know that that is not the most effective messaging for the district. Because Will Lawrence, he ran a very interesting campaign. So did the other candidates. This is a district, though, that you need to win. Livingston County, you got to win Eaton, you got to get places in Clinton counties, Lansing and East Lansing. The county has become more geographically diverse. And he has also said some things about black voters that are like, I don't know if Will Lawrence can cobble together the coalition necessary to beat the incumbent, but we're going to find out shortly. I say that as somebody in terms of needing better consultants for the super PACs. I also used to be a consultant for a super PAC.
And the other
okay,
thing,
so,
the other thing
everybody
now,
needs somebody.
I would say to the Abdullah Syed and Bernie Sanders endorsed him. They have a theory of the case about why that strand of politics can work in swing districts and in swing states. They do have a theory. And now it's like, okay, time to put the theory into practice because this is a gettable seat. So from theory to praxis, here we go.
If you think that this can work, now's the time to show it. Let's check back in with Chris Jansing, live from Abdullah Syed's election headquarters in Michigan, where things still sound celebratory, although I'm guessing since we last spoke to you, Chris, things have gotten a little more tense.
Let me say this. I think a good playlist is key to keeping people engaged. So that's been helpful here. I don't know who to credit with the playlist. But I just got a text again from inside the room where they're watching the results. And I think this is a reaction to the report on the early voting, 40,000 ballots that came in Detroit that heavily favored Haley Stevens. And what they wrote to me is the Detroit tabulations show election day voting breaking very favorably for them, so they feel good about that. But I also ran into in the crowd a young guy who is actually in charge of their canvassing, and I was out with him for a little while yesterday, and I said, what do you have? What's your final? The primary is over, and I mentioned earlier, I think, that they had 12,000 volunteers. Well, they knocked on 225,000 doors. This guy alone knocked on 21,008 doors. Now, anybody who follows politics knows that doors knocked are not engagements, but they're finding that people not only are answering more, but want to talk more. They are more open because of their own lived experience to having a conversation about healthcare, about the economy, about the things that Abdul Al-Sayed is talking about. And I found it really interesting when we were having a conversation about sort of this return to the ground game, after so much money was spent on not just television and on alternate media, but, they just have so much technology now. And Abdul Al-Sayed believes that kind of like his basic premise is that you have to return to the roots of the Democratic Party. You have to be a party for the people. You need to be, as part of that, return to your roots, which is talking to people, hearing what future constituents have to say to you. And so he feels good about the fact that so many conversations have been had with this young army of volunteers, many of whom, I should say, told me yesterday and today that, number one, obviously they believe he's going to win tonight, but that they're willing to do whatever needs to be done. They're not done knocking on doors. They're not done canvassing. So that's a very important thing. I also heard Ali Vitale's report that the crowd was thinning, and there was a point here at which the crowd started to thin a little bit. This is a 100-year-old building, the Majestic Theater, and let's just say that the air conditioning system is challenged. So I thought maybe people were leaving because then I lost my jacket. Actually, there's a bar, in quotes, out in the lobby, which people have been going to. And I'm reporting this only for you because you made me one of the best cocktails of my life, Rachel Maddow. They have three mocktails, the money out of politics, the money in your pocket, and the Medicare for all, obviously, which is his campaign slogan. They are $6 each. But these folks have been here for 4 hours. They're thirsty. no food available for sale at the bar, Rachel.
Oh, wow. All right. So we're getting into the limits of human endurance when you combine the excitement, the endorphins, the suspense, the close quarters, the excellent playlist, the desire to move your feet, and the lack of air conditioning and no food. I get, you put all those things together and it's a biology test.
Here's my fan.
Yeah. All right, Chris. All right, well, hang tight, hydrate, my friend. Hydrate. We'll be back with you as we get in more results.
Thanks.
That's excellent. We are told by our election unit, interestingly, that in Michigan, as we're continuing to watch this very, very close race, we are told by our election unit that we believe there's more of the advance vote still to count in Michigan than there is day of vote still to count. So if the theory of the case is right, that people who voted today broke disproportionately for El-Sayed, the fact that there's more advance vote left to count would be good news to Haley Stevens supporters. That said, El-Sayed is a little bit ahead of Haley Stevens right now with 56% of the vote in. We're going to get a little more nuance and perspective on this from our friend Eugene Daniels, who's been doing his own reporting on this, including talking with folks on the Haley Stevens campaign. We've got the latest news and numbers from Michigan and that new reporting right after this quick break. This is Down to the Wire. It's 11:42 p.m. East Coast time, and this is the status in the Democratic Senate primary in Michigan right now. You see the lead for Abdul El-Sayed is just over 22,000 votes. Joining us now is Eugene Daniels, who's been in touch tonight with the Haley Stevens campaign as they've seen these numbers ping around. Eugene, what are you hearing from folks?
They're feeling a lot better, Rachel, than they were feeling earlier. I think you can always tell as a reporter how the campaigns are feeling based on whether or not they answer your calls. And at the beginning of the night, they weren't, and now they're answering. And I will say one of the things that I found really interesting and something that they continue to push was her rural vote, is that at the end of the day, they are actually kind of surprised by how strong she is doing in the rural vote. I also talked to some folks who are the data crunchers, some of the best in the country, I've been told, and those are those folks in Michigan. They're anticipating a very late night, even 4 a.m. Multiple people said, including Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who knows the state better than almost anyone who I just spoke with. And something that's really interesting for folks that are kind of waiting for Wayne County and trying to figure out how to parse through this, Detroit, Dearborn, and Dearborn Heights. So Dearborn Heights and Dearborn, he's probably going to do really well there, El-Sayed. Detroit is where she might do really well. If we start seeing numbers, these folks are telling me, Rachel, where 20 to 25K, she nets that is where you're going to start seeing a really good, possibly a really good night for Haley in a way that folks really didn't think that was going to happen. They said, and the Haley campaign has said this to me, that at the end of the day, the absentee ballots that folks have been using, the increased usage of that this time around has been something that she has benefited from, because in those rural areas, TV still matters, right? You can't get to all of those areas and shake hands with everyone, and people don't spend a lot of time there, but the amount of money that's spent on TV there matters. I will just caution folks on the Haley side who are super excited that her Oakland numbers weren't great, and they know that. And so if she's able to make that up in Wayne County, she will have a much better night, I think, than people will say. Either way, this is going to be much closer than the polls were saying, than folks I was talking to on both campaigns earlier today thought it was going to be, because at the end of the day, the voters have, as we say all the time here, have the last word, and they have been voting in different ways, and I think people, even in Michigan, anticipate and have been ready. There's more energy from the rural areas than folks anticipated, Rachel.
And Eugene, this is a question you may not have asked, but just in case, because it's been a discussion we've been having here on set. Any theory of the case that you're hearing from informed people in Michigan or from the Stevens campaign specifically about why the polling might not be necessarily have, well, it's not just an individual poll, but sort of the whole last tranche of polls heading into tonight may have overstated the support for Sayed?
Part of the reason, I was talking to a couple people when I did ask this exact same question, because I think the last poll we saw, there was like a 15-point, he was winning by 15 points. And we were all a little iffy about that one, and especially in a primary like this one. But what they said is you have to look at who they're polling, right? Who are the folks that they're actually talking to? And some of the times in some of these polls where he was winning a lot, they were kind of over-indexing and kind of taking his theory of the case that the Democratic base and more importantly, the folks that were going to vote in this Democratic primary were going to be different than in the past primaries. And so that's, when I talked to someone who really knows the state and said, quote, I'm pissed at the pollsters.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, this has been a recurring theme over the course of my lifetime covering Democratic electoral outcomes, particularly ones that are a surprise. It says it's not a happy story to tell you, but anytime anybody's telling you that the reason they're going to win is because of all the young people who are turning out to vote for them, that is often something that you need to check twice before you cut once, because that is there's a reason that older voters have disproportionate influence in every election. It's because older voters vote more reliably than young voters do, and if you're banking on young voters, you also have to make sure they actually vote, and they're not just telling you that they will. Eugene, this is totally invaluable. Please stay on the phones. Let us know as soon as you got something. We'll have you back on the air as soon as we can get you.
I will.
All right, thanks, Eugene. Peter, I want to go back to you. I know you've actually got some more conversations that you had with voters in Saginaw, Michigan, about how they were thinking about the race overall, how they were thinking about the other side. Can you walk us through some of that you heard from voters?
So again, the reason we went to Saginaw, Michigan, which is about 100 miles northwest of Detroit, is because this is a place where they pick political winners. They've got it right 5 times for President Obama, twice Trump, Biden. Trump, we went there. They picked Alyssa Slotkin by 9 votes over Mike Rogers 4 years ago. Or 2 years ago, she ended up winning the state by fewer than 20,000. Here was one of the voices we met. These folks, they make popcorn, by the way, okay? So I think you'll enjoy this at this hour. We're all getting a little bit hungry. Here's what some of them said in terms of advice to the Democratic Party broadly. What do you say to those national Democrats right now? What do you say to Democrats? What do you say to Democrats around the country right now who are watching this race closely?
Have faith in their voters, listen to their voters, and consider all aspects, not just big employers and what those dollars look like for them, but what the small businesses and what their decisions are doing are impacting us.
So 1 month in, your advice to anybody looking to start a business right now?
Do it scared. You can absolutely be fearful, but you just fear less.
It seems like there's a message in there for Democrats right now, right?
Absolutely. Move forward with what we know needs to be done and stand 10 toes deep in it.
Stand 10 toes deep in it, you heard her say there. The gist was,
she's awesome.
As she started, well, first of all, here, Cake's the great. I got you some popcorn if you need. It was made in a factory with nuts, just a warning to anybody on the set here, okay?
Does anybody need me not to open this because it has nuts?
Nope.
Good.
I was going to say, do it.
I'll be back in 20 minutes. Goodbye.
The important point she made there, right, is she said as a new small business owner, she said, we got to be fearless in how we run our business. And she said the message to Democrats was they need to fear less. They need to lean more in to what they want.
And
not
have
just to
faith in their voters.
Have faith in the voters. That's why we talk about the polls so much here. That's why this was so invaluable to be on the ground with the actual people who are making this decision, that we're talking about tonight. And I spoke to her again within the last couple of hours. She's the one who told me that if Haley Stevens ended up winning, she would have to support Haley Stevens. But what else was striking that she said in these conversations is, we think about this in big terms, in national terms. She views this in terms that affect her family. She was worried about tariffs, the impact on her business. She's worried about affordability, how much it costs for her daughter, who was there, a lovely 20-year-old. She was outstanding. She made the popcorn. The fear she has for her future. These were the things that affect them at home, not the things I think that are sort of, just bigger in the sky topics, the things that really affect them at their kitchen table, and as it turns out, at the table where they make this popcorn.
I was thinking about, the geography of Michigan right now, and that affecting.
It's delicious.
Okay, I'm talking right now, so I'm not going to do this, but it's ready.
No, they always
locked
tell
and
you,
loaded.
eat on live
Good
television.
mix, too. We love
Definitely
a
eat something
mix.
crunchy on live television.
Day one of broadcast.
Ooh, it's Myrtle Turtle.
Yeah, thinking about the geography of Michigan and these affordability issues. I mean, Michigan not only, I mean, Haley Stevens has this great story to tell, right? That she was the chief of staff to the auto rescue effort during the Great Recession, saved 200,000 jobs in Michigan during the recession. That said, United Auto Workers did not endorse her, endorsed Abdul El-Sayed. Michigan has this incredible both sides, you know, really interesting role in the tariff scandal with Trump. These poorly thought out, seemingly random number generated tariffs, and those cut lots of different directions in Michigan. But I was also thinking about that bridge. Right? So this bridge, the international bridge between Michigan and Canada, where there's this one totally dysfunctional bridge that's run by a family that walked into the White House and gave Donald Trump $1 million campaign check, and he turned around and said, okay, we're not opening the competing bridge. That is going to make life so much materially more easy for Michigan businesses, large and small. And so this stuff that we think of as like Washington drama, in Michigan, it's shoe leather stuff.
You're right. I said this earlier. I repeat it because she brought it up again. We talk about ICE. We talk about immigration enforcement. Like 10 days ago, there was an ICE crackdown. There, 9 construction workers were arrested. She said she passed it just a couple of days ago driving home. The engine was still running as she passed this spot. This stuff is tangible to these people in these communities. It has real impact, and ultimately it affects the way that they make their decisions and the way they vote on nights like tonight.
And so it will matter to Democrats, both in the state and nationally, but especially nationally, to look at the narratives that are taking shape coming out of this primary race tonight. How not so much look at the horse race of it all, but look at what moved the voters. Yeah. What actually animated them to give a damn, to get up, to take that time off from work, to your point, and to actually go stand in a line for however long, do the thing, do the vote, to make it known what they wanted. And if you're able to capture that, and it was a very important lesson for me in 2009, looking at 2010. Watching what voters were saying in New Jersey and Virginia in 2009 gave me a clue of how to begin to talk to voters in 2010, because the message was the same. And so that reality is going to be true across the board here for a lot of voters across the country, not just in the hamlets of Michigan, but in very small and big places elsewhere. And if they can make that case, again, a case Republicans cannot make. And I say that as a very frustrated Republican with my own party that says, I don't see how you guys spent the last 2 years listening to this idiot in the White House who gave you nothing to tell voters. Yeah. The only thing he wanted to talk about was a reflecting pool and a ballroom. Renovations. When the country, the only renovation they're trying to do is to their own kitchen tables.
These folks I met talked about the housing bill recently, the biggest bipartisan effort, right, recently, the big difference maker for folks as it relates to affordable housing in this country, and the president refused to show up for it. You know, that stuff.
He said it bored him.
He said it bored him.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Crazy.
We're talking about Saginaw County. What do we have for results in Saginaw County?
Votes in, 58.2% to Haley Stevens, 37.3% to Abdul El-Sayed. So she's doing very well there. Again, still only 45% in. We're still looking at, we've got 61% in the entire state. Abdul El-Sayed's lead has increased. He's now closing in on a 30,000 vote lead. He's been between 20 and 25,000 all night. Let's go to Detroit, to Wayne County again. Again, almost half the vote is in now, 48%. Haley Stevens is in the lead, but her lead has narrowed substantially. She has a 12,000 vote lead. Remember, she jumped way ahead in Wayne County. We do believe, however, that the outstanding vote, it's above 600,000 Democratic votes right now to count. We believe that more of them may be advanced votes than day of votes. Now, that's true.
In Wayne County specifically?
In Wayne County. And the rationale for discussing that is what you just said. The advance votes tend to be older voters. The young voters that you're depending on are typically day of voters, and Abdul Sayed's been banking on those day of voters. So if it's true that most of the outstanding vote is advance vote, that tends to favor Haley Stevens. She does have a statewide deficit to overcome because Abdul El Sayed is still there. And like I mentioned, we still are waiting for some vote from key areas of Detroit, of Wayne County, that we haven't seen yet, including Hamtramck, which is likely to favor Abdul El Sayed. We have seen a good amount of vote from Dearborn and Dearborn Heights, those areas which have come in. They're not just favoring Abdul El Sayed, they're coming in at about 80-20 in his favor. That's where he expected to do very well. But again, this area, this actual central part of Detroit, we're still waiting for a good deal of vote, advance vote and day of vote.
All right, our primary night coverage is going to continue on MS Now. We do have to take a very quick break because all of us have popcorn sitting in front of us that we feel like we can't eat while you're looking at us. So we're just going to take a quick minute to just stuff our faces, and then we'll be right back after this quick break. Stay with us.
Steve Kornacki is with us.
Steve Kornacki is here. I love a Kornacki camp.
I'm a numbers guy. That's what I do. We are here live to bring you all the results. But I see more than polls and votes. I see patterns and possibilities. And the pattern is unmistakable. I see the data for what it could decide for everyone. I see a roadmap for where the country is headed. And once you see why it all matters, you can't unsee it.
Now this is interesting.
See it like Steve Kornacki, only on NBC News.
And welcome back to our continued coverage of this big primary election night. I'm Jonathan Capehart, along with Jackie Alemany and Eugene Daniels. The polls are closed across 5 states, and the votes are still being counted in the most closely watched of all of today's races. That is the Democratic Senate primary in Michigan, a must-hold seat for Democrats to have a shot at taking back the Senate and holding President Trump accountable during his final 2 years in office. And that race is tight. Right now, Abdul El Sayed continues to hold a slim lead over Congresswoman Haley Stevens. The winner will face, in the November general election, Republican former Congressman Mike Rogers, who ran unopposed for the GOP nomination. In another big Michigan race, Jocelyn Benson, Michigan's Secretary of State, is the projected winner in the Democratic primary for governor. Donald Trump featured prominently in her victory speech earlier tonight.
I will work for all of you and every Michigander in this state, not the highest bidder, not corporate interests, not Donald Trump, you. But I'm also unafraid to stand up to anyone who gets in our way. And this moment demands leaders who will stand up with courage, unafraid to bullies. And boy, boy, do I know how to do that. Like when Donald Trump tried to pressure me into turning over your private voting information, I said no, and I'll see you in court. And I won.
Benson will face Trump-backed Republican Congressman Representative John James, who won his primary tonight. In one of the night's most closely watched congressional races, Michigan's 7th district, progressive activist William Lawrence defeated 2 more moderate Democratic rivals and will face Republican incumbent Congressman Tom Barrett. This is one of the most closely divided swing seats in the nation. And after an introduction like that, the very first place we must go is right to Ali Velshi at the big board. So bring us up to speed on where things are right now.
It's a very tricky race. We have 64% of the vote in, and we've been seeing this moving back and forth between Abdul El Sayed and Haley Stevens. Abdul Sayed is in the lead, and in fact, his lead has just grown. He is now 33,500 votes ahead of Haley Stevens. His vote lead for most of the night was 20 to 25,000 votes, so his lead in the state has grown, but he's still facing a lot of headwinds in Wayne County. 49% of the vote is in Wayne County. Wayne County is the most populous part of the state. It includes Detroit, but a little bit more, and Dearborn Heights. It's about 25% of the state's population. Haley Stevens is in the lead there, but her lead is shrinking with every percent that comes in. She's now in the lead by 12,000. She needs to be doing substantially better than that. She needs to be running at about 60 or 65% to Abdul El-Sayed, and right now she's at 52%. I'll show you what's going on here. This is Detroit. Let me just show you. This is Detroit basically here. This is Dearborn over here, which is where the Ford plant is. Very strong area of support for Abdul El-Sayed, and next to it is Dearborn Heights. Both of those areas are coming in for El-Sayed at about 80-20, but in Detroit itself, Haley Stevens is outperforming as she expected she would. There are a couple of holes in Detroit that we're waiting to fill, including Hamtramck. So the Ford plant is here in Dearborn, the GM plant is in Hamtramck, and we're still waiting to see where those votes are. That's somewhere that Abdul El-Sayed might be able to make up some votes, but all the vote from Dearborn and Dearborn Heights is in. So we're waiting to see where this remaining 50% of the vote is. We believe that a lot of it is actually in advance vote. That favors Haley Stevens. The day of vote would have favored Abdul El-Sayed. Right now, the count, so we have about 530,000 votes outstanding, and we have to see how these break. So even though Abdul El-Sayed is leading by about 33,000 votes statewide, there's 500,000 votes to come. So this is still, we're going to be busy for the next little while. I don't know if the last team left you their popcorn.
Yeah, no, they did. They took it with them. Can you take us to Oakland County?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's Haley Stevens' district.
Yes, that's where she's from.
And one of the things that I've heard over and over today is that she needs to be doing much better than she's doing now in Oakland.
Yeah, so we've got 95% of the vote in Oakland, so that's pretty complete. And she's running 6 points ahead of Abdul El-Sayed. That's not where she should be here. She should be running sort of almost 2/3 to hit. In the places where he's strong, his margins are substantially bigger than hers. She's winning in a lot of places. I think you were talking to people on the campaign. Yeah. She's winning in a lot of counties. All the lighter color is Haley Stevens. There are about 8 counties where we have no vote, but where she's winning, some of these rural places that you were talking about, Otsego County, she's winning by 128 votes. Montmorency County, 226 votes. Kalkaska County, 5 votes. So she's winning a lot of counties, but look at the vote differences. If you go down to Washtenaw County, 78% of the vote in, Abdul El-Sayed is ahead by 21,000 votes. So in the urban centers, generally speaking, he's doing better. The 2 places that we're paying very close attention to are Genesee County. 1/3 of the vote is in. Haley Stevens is ahead, but again, see that? It's a 6% difference. And of course, Detroit, Wayne County, where Haley Stevens is ahead, but like I said, by 12,000. So it's entirely possible Haley Stevens can more than make up this difference, but she's got to be performing at numbers bigger than that. It can't be 52 to 44. It's got to be 60 plus to under 40 for Abdul El-Sayed.
Ali Velshi, thank you so much for breaking that all down. We are going to be in constant contact with you. Thankfully, you are arm's length away. And joining us now is Ali Vitale, live from Congresswoman Haley Stevens' election night headquarters in Detroit, and Chris Jansing, live from Abdul El-Sayed's election night headquarters, also in Detroit. Ladies, so good to see you. I know it's been a long day for the both of you. I would love to get a little bit of a vibe check, starting with you, Ali, and whether or not you have heard anything from the Stevens campaign about those numbers that Ali Velshi was just breaking down, and the fact that Haley, in the places, the counties that she is winning, her numbers just aren't big enough yet.
I think that is very much the recognition of the campaign, though I have heard some optimists say, well, she's picking up in some of the rural areas that Ali is talking about better than the numbers that they thought she was going to get. Really, at the end of the day, it is all about Detroit. Multiple people in and around the campaign have said that to me in the last hour or so. And I think what someone said to me rings true, this idea that win or lose, they were saying, they ran a Detroit campaign, which is to say the time that Stevens spent campaigning at black churches throughout the county, that was time that they needed to build that coalition and energize them to turn out. You know, you all know this so well. Black voters, the lifeblood of the Democratic Party and the Democratic coalition throughout battleground states, including Michigan. And so that was very much a key part of Stevens' calculus here as she was figuring out what the coalition that her campaign thought was going to get her over the finish line. It tests the theory of the case that a lot of Democrats point to, especially in battlegrounds, which is energizing the voters that you know are habituated to vote and vote often in your race. El Sayed's calculus is different, and it's why I think it's notable the margins that Ali Velshi was pointing to in places that might show that he is turning out new voters, infrequent voters, first-time voters. I met a few of those today when I was in Northwest Detroit at a community center before coming over to Stevens HQ. As far as what the Congresswoman is doing right now, she hasn't been seen here tonight. There has been supporters here in the room, though this room right now, very contrary to what it looked like Chris Jensen had behind her, has the air of the club closing and the last stragglers kind of leaving. They haven't told people to go home yet, but I do think it's just a matter of time at this point, because you can see the room is pretty empty behind me. And I think the thing I've been asking the campaign is, do we expect to hear from the Congresswoman? Because my understanding of what she's been doing is waiting for results to come in. She's been with supporters. We are at a hotel right now. She is in a room sort of sequestered away with friends and allies, among them her fellow Democratic Congresswoman Hillary Scholten. The two of them are playing Scrabble, according to a source familiar. So that is just one of the ways that she is trying to pass the time tonight as they wait for what most of my sources are telling me, and I'm sure you guys are hearing the same thing, that this is likely to be a long night. Wayne County being so important, it takes a long time for them to count there. We've been here before, and I think a lot of people are buckling in, maybe trying to catch a little bit of sleep before they set an early alarm to see what the next few hours bring, because I think it might be a while.
Ali Vitale, thank you for that report at the bar closing down at the Haley Stevens campaign headquarters. Let's go to Chris Jansing, who is at the headquarters or the party for Abdul El Sayed. And Chris, definitely just visually a completely different mood where you are. Bring us up to speed on what you've been hearing, the mood there at the Abdul El Sayed party.
Yeah, I just heard from the campaign where they said where they're back in a room watching the results and getting their own analysis, obviously, from their people. The mood is still very high. However, there is a recognition, and I actually overheard someone saying, I do have to work tomorrow. We forget sometimes even what day it is when you've been on the campaign trail. That there was a huge cheer. They had someone come out to the mic and say, Abdul is coming out, don't leave. And I'm telling you, this place is still pretty packed. He's coming out at 1 a.m. Eastern time, so in, 50 minutes or so, 45 minutes or so. And he will speak earlier if this race is called, but I don't think anybody is expecting that. But he definitely wants to speak to the folks here, many of whom have spent a lot of time over the last 15 months and certainly intensively over the last couple of months working as volunteers for his campaign, union workers. There are folks here. I've met people from California, met people from other states, Colorado, Pennsylvania, who wanted to be here to support him. Now, I will tell you, they're watching the results and having a little different interpretation than the Haley folks, as Ali just reported. They like what they're seeing coming out of rural counties. They like what they're seeing coming out of Trump counties. And it was a very specific strategy that Abdul El Sayed had and talked to me at some length about it, about how he wanted to go to places that Democrats generally didn't go. He wanted to talk to people and have his people talk to people who generally don't get spoken to. And they think that that strategy is starting to pay off. And of course, at the heart of this campaign always was young voters. And they're seeing young voters not only in great numbers, but they've had people at various polls in key precincts where they say that they have had more young voters than even they anticipated. And I think you're seeing some of that in just the turnout numbers, which have been huge for a primary. I think the other thing is that he drew a comparison, actually, between himself and Donald Trump in terms of strategy. Now, he said, and I don't think I need to repeat it because you all know it, he and Donald Trump agree on virtually zero, except this. He said the people who voted for Donald Trump and put him in office twice were anti-establishment. They were sick of the way they felt they were being treated by the people in power. And that's been the driver of this campaign. It's what I've heard over and over again from the people in this room, the people I've met on the campaign trail, at his rallies, and going door to door. And it will remain the heart of this campaign, even though at 2 a.m. their contract is up. This place has to be cleared. So Abdul El-Sayed will take to the microphone at 1 o'clock. I think once they announced that, these folks were not about to leave.
Ali Vitale and Chris Jansen don't go far. The night's getting longer and longer, but we're happy to have both of you with us. Thank you so much. We are now joined by our colleagues Symone Sanders-Townsend and Michael Steele, co-hosts of The Weeknight and experts on everything election nights, considering you have both been here before on both sides.
That's why we came to join y'all. We know how it is to be here on each side, and we know how it is to be here at midnight.
Exactly,
so
exactly.
Kudos.
We appreciate it.
This hour feels so much different.
It feels different when you're on that side of it, doesn't it?
We're reframing this hour. This is the after party.
This is the after party. The fun.
Nice.
There's no popcorn, but
A
that's
dangerous
okay.
thing for Michael Steele.
Space.
He's getting too excited. Chairman, let me get this back together. Chairman,
up.
you have
my drink.
you have been here where you see polling come in, polling being consistently one way, and then the night of it start to change. And the thing that I think has been so interesting for Haley Stevens and talking to her, I've been talking to her folks around her campaign and even just Democrats in Michigan. And what they have said is they are surprised by the rural vote that's coming in for her. It may not be enough, but what they told me is the TV still continues to matter. The commercials, the amount of money that's being spent, even when she hasn't been out there knocking on doors in those rural areas, she's still seeing numbers happening there that it could be, depending on what happens in Wayne County, enough to say.
Yeah, look, that's the reality that you know her campaign is living in right now, and it's two realities that come together in the point you're making. The first is there's a reason why she is more viable, according to polls, in a general against Mike Rogers, because of what you're seeing playing out in the rural communities. They like her, right? She's an okay brand, and so that adds value to it. The second part of it is, again, this idea that she has the ability to make a connection that draws down votes that they think will translate in some place like Wayne. Right. So you take that sort of more urban center, and then you take that rural, and you put those two together. That's a winning mix in an election of two types of voters that can make a real difference in your campaign, which says a lot to me about how they focus their energy in this race. And I get the sense in watching and listening to folks tonight, as reported by Chris and others from the campaign, that her people at the end of the day really aren't that, and even yourself, gave me the sense, they're not that worried. They're not that worried. You can always tell when a campaign has reached Symone, right? When they reach that point.
I think they were worried.
I mean, I think.
And now they seeing what was happening, what the voters did. They're like, oh, well, maybe it's okay.
That's when the reporters' phone
know what
calls
was
now.
coming out of those rural counties yet. They didn't know, and they had no clue what Wayne was going to give them. And when it starts to trickle out, you're like, okay, did our experiment work? And I think we'll see. It may all still not pan out for them. It may, but we'll see. There's one last thing I want to put on the table, which is very important, from what Chris just said. And El-Sayed is talking about the one thing he has in common from Donald Trump that he learned from Donald Trump is this whole thing with the establishment. Well, the lesson that Donald Trump hasn't learned is what do you do when you become the establishment?
Right.
And Mr. El-Sayed, you will become the establishment a lot quicker than you think you will when you become the senator. And that's the reality that a lot of these folks aren't translating yet, which is why voters feel the way they feel about a lot of these campaigns and these candidates and these elections, is at the end of the day, it's the same old, same old. We go around the bend and we wind up where we started.
Can I just put one thing on the table? Two things. One, as a former comm strategist, I think it is despicable that the staff told the reporters that the Congresswoman and Hillary and the other Congresswoman, Hillary Scholten and the other Congresswoman, Hillary Scholten's other Congresswoman were playing Scrabble, and that they don't know if she's going to address the supporters.
I also
that
heard
is
that
insane.
she was calling around to folks who were in Michigan, asking them, "What are you hearing? What numbers do we have
Now
left?"
that is fine because that's what a candidate. I would understand if that's what but to tell the people that the girl's playing Scrabble, no. She needs to be calling and get out there and address her supporters. I don't care what happens tonight. The people were there. They came out to see her. You need to address your people, even just to say we don't know how this is going to shake out, but I appreciate y'all. Secondly, I don't think anyone has effectively defined for me tonight, not even my former boss, Bernie Sanders, who the establishment is. And I do think that is establishment is becoming a catch-all.
Yes.
And,
but the voters have defined it.
No, they have not. I think the voters, I don't think that they have defined it. I think establishment is like AIPAC money right now. Like they're talking about AIPAC money.
It's a different thing to everybody, but they've defined it.
I mean,
I do wonder if it's more of an anti-incumbency feeling rather than anti-establishment. Because if you're looking at some other races where the incumbent is losing against whoever's challenging them, it's not like the challenger is the progressive, Medicare for all person. And in terms on the merits of the policies, there's just not a lot of ideological consistency there when you look from race to race, other than anti-incumbency.
Because it's not about ideology, I don't believe.
Well, to that point, I'm looking at the race of Congressman Wesley Bell against former Congresswoman Cori Bush, who he defeated in the last election in the primary, and he roared to victory in the primary against her. He's establishment. He's the incumbent.
I would just note my only question about the establishment.
He's the incumbent. So if we're going to take this mantra that everyone's against the establishment, everyone's against the incumbent, in that one particular race, that's not exactly the case. But I'm just putting a little point on that because my question for you, Simone, goes back to the big race we've been talking about, and that is Dr. Abdul El-Sayed against Congresswoman Haley Stevens. Whichever one wins the primary, either tonight or I should say later this morning, because it is after midnight, they're going to have to face Mike Rogers, former congressman who was defeated in 2024 by now Senator Elissa Slotkin she won by just 21,000 votes. Given what Eugene just said about how Congresswoman Stevens is doing in rural counties, and given what Chairman Steele just said about someone who can appeal to the folks in Detroit, but also those rural counties, take that into account about who then might be the better person, the better Democratic candidate to go up against Mike Rogers.
Before you answer that, I just want to let the viewers know we're expecting Haley Stevens to speak in just about 20 minutes.
Maybe they were watching. Thank you. Maybe they were watching. Maybe you were listening. That's a good decision. Let me just, I'm just saying, Scrabble is crazy.
Already.
Scrabble is crazy.
Scrabble is over.
Scrabble was crazy. Okay, two things. One, I'm going to continue to ask for the rest of this general election going into who is the establishment. And I think people need to be able to, I think the folks who are on, not us, but like these candidates and whatnot talking about the establishment, that matters because as a black pastor who's been organizing the community, the establishment is labor, the establishment, or are we using it as a catch-all for people who are
whoever you want
the incumbency, right? Like I do think like what the people are talking about, like when they say Democratic Party, sometimes they mean DNC, sometimes I mean D-Trip, sometimes they just talk about Chuck Schumer. So I do think it is important to define what it is. But to your point, either candidate, if whoever wins has a path against Mike Rogers. But this is the thing to know about how Mike Rogers narrowly lost. He did better in Democratic places, in counties where Democrats usually do well. He made inroads in Macomb County in 2024. But the thing that Elissa Slotkin did is she lost better in places where Democrats usually lose, something that the chairman, we talk about often.
Well.
In these rural Republican areas, she ran up her numbers. She didn't win, but she outperformed margins, and that is what allowed her to go to surge to victory. And at a time where candidate at the top of the ticket in 2024, Vice President Kamala Harris, lost Michigan. There were voters that voted for Donald Trump and then turned around and voted for Alyssa Slotkin. I do think that there could be voters in this general election that could vote for John James, frankly, for governor of the state and turn around and maybe vote for El Sayed. Same thing could happen. They might turn around and vote for Haley Stevens. It just depends what these candidates decide to do between now and the end of September. And I'm very specific with the end of September, okay? Because if you start doing it in October, it ain't going to be enough.
Right.
I would say if you don't have it together by Labor Day, it's over. Because the race for any office in the country, the bell rings when parents put the kids on the school bus that Tuesday after Labor Day. That's it. It doesn't matter whether they were in school 2 weeks before in August. No, Labor Day, baby. Trust me on this. If your campaign don't have a plan and you don't have a clue, stay behind home. Race is over. Don't engage.
Clock it, Michael Steele.
You just make a fool of yourself, trust me.
Meanwhile, the campaigns of Abdul El Sayed.
You said it was a party.
When is the after party or no?
We have to take a quick break, but Abdul El Sayed and Haley Stevens have both announced that the candidates will address their supporters before the top of the hour. We're going to bring you those speeches live. And this race, the biggest of today's primary elections, have not yet been called. So don't go anywhere. Our live MS Now coverage continues after this short break.
Yeah, totally.
Simone Sanders and Michael Steele are back with us.
Townsend.
Simone Sanders.
My husband is watching.
I don't know why I skipped over that.
It's all right.
Simone, as someone who was at one point on the other side of this conversation, I want to ask you about the polling here, because as I've said repeatedly on our show on the weekends, I am now very consistently distrustful of the polling. And I think that something that we're seeing tonight is obviously it being a much closer race between Haley Stevens and Abdul El Sayed than we expected. And it feels like the through line, or the one of the primary reasons for that narrative getting pushed that way, is that the internet is not real life.
Preach, Jackie. Where's my cup?
I'm wondering, as someone on the other side, how you balance that fact, right? How do you encourage online momentum and positivity and support for someone that seems to be helping them in some way, with also being able to temper expectations and coming to terms with the fact that just because someone is constantly viral doesn't mean they're necessarily going to have a blowout race.
Yeah, what is happening, what happens online can be very important to a race and a campaign, because it allows you, the narrative, and it allows you to get, attention, clicks, opportunities, national opportunities that give you more opportunities to also fundraise, right? If people look as though they are surging and everybody's talking about them, then it's like, oh, we want to have them on the shows, right? They might get invited on the late nights. Things like that. So online is very important to help create a conversation. Campaigns that do not have an online presence and can't create a community, I think they can often struggle with like the enthusiasm piece of that. And I think we have seen that play out in different places across the country. But polls don't vote, people do, and online is not real life. And so you always have to gut check in a campaign. We used to say this when I worked on the Biden campaign in 2020. Online, they were like, Joe Biden is a terrible candidate. He's never winning this primary. Why is he in it? But when we would go to places like South Carolina, we would be going to some places in New Hampshire, even though he lost very badly in New Hampshire. There were people that liked him there. Places all across the country, and on Super Tuesday states. The voters in these places and spaces were responding well to Joe Biden. And so I do think it is important you can never, just like money is not going to replace good retail campaign, good retail politics, online engagement and excitement will never actually replace voter-to-voter contact. You still have to ask the voters. And lastly, I'll note, the majority of people are not online. Like only a fraction of the electorate, a very small fraction is on Twitter. Another smaller fraction is on Threads or Instagram. And then a subset of that is also on Facebook, which is a little bit older. And so the best way to know what the voters are really thinking is to go out there and campaign in your district and your state and talk to them.
I will say this. I've been texting some of the Michigan people, and I'm getting some messages multiple, because I asked the same question. What is going on with the polls? Why were were the polls so wrong? Over and over and over again, what I've heard right now, I think they overstated the number of young people. And so, Chairman, when folks are polling, right, it is what is the group that you choose to talk to is as important as anything. Oh, Lord. It's as important as anything else. Do you try to look at the bet that someone like Abdul El-Sayed is making, that he is remaking the Democratic primary electorate, or do you go with what is consistent? Who are the people that constantly vote? That is the answer.
You're remaking something.
Right. And you can't do that until people vote on the Tuesday.
Thank you. That ain't happening until Election Day.
Right.
So all the noise up front ain't telling me anything. When you sit down with a pollster's going to say, we want to go out in the field and we want to ask, 582 people a series of questions. Okay. What are the questions? Everybody spends a lot of time over the questions. Nobody spends any time, who the hell you told me talking to? No one asked. Okay, so who are these 582 people you'll be talking to?
Right.
Because it matters how you weight that poll.
Right.
Now, I guarantee you, because somewhere along the way, somebody in that orbit saw El-Sayed in a room full of young people, and they were like, oh, baby, happy day. Look at this. We like this brother, right? They went out and they oversampled young people. And the truism in politics is that young people, hate to say it, y'all know I've been preaching.
Don't come for
they're
us.
getting better. Yeah, I'm just gonna put it on the table.
We are the future.
Baby, your future was about
when he's talking about.
What I'm talking about, that 18-year-old right now, right? That 25-year-old right now. You got to talk to your fellow friends and neighbors and family members to get their behinds in the game, because they don't vote the way they should, right? It's hit or miss, sporadic. And you cannot, it's not a good campaign and a good politician and a good pollster is not going to rely on that vote, right? You're not going to get included in the conversation. You want to know why your issues aren't addressed? Because you aren't in the conversation. You know why you aren't in the conversation? Because you don't vote. I say to a 13 or 14-year-old, I ask them, how many of y'all have a job? And they, we have a little summer job. And I said, how many of y'all pay taxes? And they go, oh, we all pay taxes, because they take a little money out of their check, right? I said, well, you're already now invested in the game.
Right.
All right? So you have a voice. Even though you can't vote right now, go to your mama and daddy and you talk to them and say, Mama, help me understand why this money is coming out. You got to get in the game so that when you can vote, you can level up your voice so the politician who's asking you for your vote will hear you. And I bet you what happened, and Simone can speak to this, because we saw it in the Biden race. We saw it in a lot of races where they oversample to make the candidate feel good about some polling, right? Or they undersample to protect the candidate from the truth.
I think this was also a case of, though, the news, because some of these polls, the public polling, like Emerson was one of the polls that came out, which is a very reputable poll. I think that they, not to the chairman's points, they saw the energy, the virality, what was happening, the crowds that Mr. El-Sayed is getting, and said, okay, well, maybe we need to inject more young people into this sample size. The problem is that can't be the only poll. Where are the polls where you're like, we did one where we over-indexed on young people, and we did one where we did a traditional, primary Democratic electorate. And now you have something to compare it to. But all of these polls, I think, oversampled. So I wouldn't say people's polling is wrong. It is your sampling. And I think that there are times where the poll samples have been great and the poll samples haven't been great. In the final stretch of this campaign, the poll samples took it too far. The pollsters need to get off the internet.
Well, and that was 16. That was 16. We saw that with Trump, because they oversampled, because the conventional wisdom was Hillary's going to win. So everything was sampled to that outcome effectively. Her electorate, discounting that quiet voter in suburban and rural America, particularly white women, all right? Because y'all lied. We're going to be truthful.
Tell them, because they were telling the pollsters they weren't voting for
they were
Brown.
telling the pollsters.
That's exactly what a senior Trump campaign strategist told me before we went on, that he believed that there were going to be some analogies potentially to 2016 and sort of a more secretive vote around this race in particular.
Right. Yep.
But I do wonder, Simone, do you think that it's possible the El Sayed campaign didn't execute on the ground game adequately? In terms of signing those people up?
The folks that I've talked to have said, like, look, he is a different candidate. Somebody I spoke to today said he's a different candidate than he was when he ran for governor in 2018. He has grown. His message has changed. He also learned a lot. He himself has said he learned a lot from running against Gretchen Whitmer, Governor Whitmer, understanding that, like, she had a very simple thing, fix the damn roads. So his message has been very concise and very clear. I think that he struggled to break through. To the point that Eugene was making, you cannot discount the effect that money has had in this race. There were outside groups that spent a lot of money to advertise on behalf of Haley Stevens. Positive ads, but also negative ads against Abdul El Sayed. People saw those, and when you don't have anything, when you have the money to counter that, it makes a difference. That being said, we still don't know how this is going to shake out. The fact that it is close, to me, says that he did wage and has waged a very formidable campaign. And regardless of how it shakes out, I think that they should be proud of that. I think that the fact that it is close, though, to me says that Haley Stevens folks, and I would also argue Chuck Schumer, because the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, they had a lot to go. They were very involved here, okay? Even before they publicly were involved, they were privately pushing donors the way towards Congresswoman Stevens. I think that they have to also do an assessment of what they think, how they missed what was happening on the ground.
No more follow-ups to the follow-ups to the follow-ups, because we got to go.
Okay.
We're happy to go. We're going to watch y'all from home.
Yes, the after party.
The after party
is over. I mean, you don't have to go home.
I'm going to the after party.
Simone Sanders Townsend, Michael Steele, this is really fun. Thank you both very much for extending your day with us.
The whole week. The whole week.
The whole week. Yes, Michigan Senate candidate Haley Stevens will address her supporters within the next few minutes. Abdul El Sayed is expected to do the same before the top of the hour. We will bring them both to you live. And Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, they're watching us. You see that right there? Hey, everybody. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell will join us next with her thoughts on this big night. Stay with us as our MS Now primary coverage continues.
So great.
Let's bring in Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who chose not to endorse a candidate in the Michigan Senate primary, but has said that Abdul El Sayed and Congresswoman Haley Stevens have far more in common than they have differences. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us this evening. I've got to ask, I know you didn't endorse anyone, but who did you vote for today?
I'm not telling because nobody needs to know. I voted for a winner, the winner in November. I'm glad to know my gut-o-meter is still not off. I was afraid I was off for a while. It's going to be a tight race. And if you guys are staying until we know the winner, you're going to be here probably all night.
And you're confident that whoever you voted for would go on to beat Mike Rogers, no matter.
Look, we got two strong candidates, and you're seeing that the tightness of this race, they have both committed that they will work with the other. And I think that people need to remember what is at stake in November. It's been an interesting day. I had said to people, I thought it was crazy when I said I thought this race was tighter than people were saying. I knew 10 years ago, I knew months out that we had a real problem, that Hillary Clinton was not going to win the election. But what I also know is that both of these people, I know them both. I agree with most of them on many things. I disagree with both of them on some things. But I know what we got in common, which is neither of them would have ever supported a big, bad bill. They will be the first votes when we win the House majority back in November, and we cannot win the Senate back without keeping the seat Democratic, that will vote to reverse the earlier decisions. They will we will make sure the millions of people who've lost access to the Affordable Care Act can get it. If there was a vote on a Supreme Court opening, these two either of them would vote to ensure that we had a candidate that would listen to the Constitution. And those are the kinds of issues that are at stake in November, quite frankly.
Congresswoman, I've been texting with a source in Michigan, and one of the things this source said is that no matter what happens tonight in the Democratic primary, that folks are going to have to, they can only be in their feelings for like a day, and then they have to rally around. Do you think that will be possible given the campaign we just saw between these two formidable candidates?
Look, I'm not old, but I'm seasoned. I admit that, and I've seen some ugly races. This race has not been great the last couple of weeks, but I also know that they both know what's at stake, and they both know that they got to pull people together. And these are two responsible, caring people who know that we got to find a way to bring people together and see that common ground, and that they are leaders. They wouldn't be where they are right now in the Senate race if they weren't, and that they will lead in bringing a Democratic victory up and down the ticket in November.
Congresswoman, I want to ask you about Mike Rogers. Mike Rogers is, as I've talked to Michiganders for weeks, they have said he is a strong candidate. He has also spent months being unopposed, defining himself. We've not even seen a lot of national money, even though we've known it was going to be Mike Rogers at the end of the day for a long time. There hasn't been a lot of national money that's been spent trying to define Mike Rogers. And I'm curious what you think about that aspect of this, because no matter who these candidates are going to be, who that candidate at the end of the day, who's going to be probably after 4 a.m. is what I keep hearing, they are going to have to define him, but they will have about 90 days.
We don't have 90 days. We're going to have to start this week when we know who the winner is. And look, everybody wants to see me be feisty, and I am feisty. But I've known Mike Rogers. I know his wife. But this is a man who a few years ago was anti-Trump and who has made very strong supportive statements of President Trump in the last few months. Now people are saying, well, President Trump's going to give people in purple states room. You can't take back the statements that have been made. And more importantly, we got to put people on record. But even when people say on the record, well, would you vote to, we've seen Supreme Court candidates who said that they wouldn't vote to repeal Roe versus Wade and then did. But he's going to have to answer. Do you want to privatize Social Security and Medicaid? What are you going to do to lower grocery prices? Do you approve of a war in Iran? What do you think about, he's being asked those questions now about the increased gas taxes. Oh, the war is going to be over soon. Well, every hour we get a different report on what the status of the war is. And we know that Mike Rogers would have supported the big bad bill. And I'd like to use some other words, and it is almost 1 a.m., but I won't. I'll behave. And those Medicaid, Medicare cuts are going to go into more. We've already seen people lose their health care. More people are going to be really hurt after the November election, which they timed some of the very negative impacts of the bill to come in after the election. Now, our job, all of our jobs, every single Democrat, and we got to talk to the independents' job, is to make sure people know what the votes are that he is going to support President Trump on, and what Democrats are going to do to make their lives better. We can't just be anti-President Trump. We got to talk about what we're going to do.
Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, whether you're with us early in the morning on the weekend or late at night, well, now early in the morning, we always appreciate you being with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
We are just moments away from Haley Stevens' remarks to her supporters in Detroit as the vote counting continues in tonight's big race, the Michigan Democratic Senate primary. The campaign of Abdul El-Sayed says he will also speak before the top of the hour. Keep it right here on MS Now as our special primary night coverage continues. right, we're going to go right now to the Haley Stevens election headquarters there in Detroit, Michigan. You see her there in the center of the screen, well, behind that orange sign. She's going to be speaking to her supporters in just a moment. It has been a very close race. And now let's listen to Congresswoman Haley Stevens.
Thank you all. I know it's been an exciting night. I know it's been a long night, because that's the Michigan way. But I want to give you all an update, all right? We knew that this was going to be a close race, and that's exactly what we've got. A close race. We are still waiting on results, and we might not know the results until early in the morning, maybe even later tomorrow. We are still waiting on results from Detroit. We got Keith Williams in the House, the chair of the Michigan Democratic Party Black Caucus. And Keith knows we're also still waiting on results from Flint, Muskegon County, Macomb County. But friends, I am feeling good about this race. I am feeling fired up, and you should be too. But I want to talk about the stakes of this race a minute. We've had a long, hard-fought primary, and we'll know soon who our nominee is going to be. And whoever wins is going to go and take on Mike Rogers. Republicans are going to do everything they can to throw all the dirt, all the mud, the kitchen sink at us, because they want to keep the U.S. Senate red, so Mike Rogers can keep rubber stamping Donald Trump's ridiculous agenda, higher prices, 1,000 manufacturing jobs lost nationwide, corruption and abuses of power galore. They want to keep the Senate red so Mike Rogers can go to Washington again and sell us out to the highest bidder and make himself even wealthier. They want to keep the Senate red so Mike Rogers can ban abortion, gut health care, and roll back workers' rights and voting rights. Friends, we are not going to let that happen. So, Michigan, we are not going to know the results for just a little while. And the Congresswoman from West Michigan, everybody. Hillary Skolton. She's the mom of 2 great boys here, and their future's on the line. So we got to get some sleep or get some coffee. And then we got to be ready to go. We got to wake up and be ready to go, because if we are going to win this thing, which we are, we are going to have to get ready and show Mike Rogers what a little stick it to him looks like. Thank you, friends. See you soon.
All right, that is Congresswoman Haley Stevens talking to her supporters at her Detroit election headquarters, saying that she's going to be up all night, that they knew that this was going to be a hard-fought, close race, and that is the race we got. I'm quoting what the Congresswoman said. And yeah, it is a close race. If my math is right, the lead is now at, I should not do this, 2.8 percentage points. Allie is standing right there. Is my math right there?
I can't believe you just did that.
Is he right?
Yeah, he's right.
Okay, good. I'm right.
Yes. Yes, no, you're absolutely
I am right.
And whatever that percentage is, Mallory McMorrow
has gotten more
than that discrepancy.
Yeah, that is right.
It's really wild. Look at this. I mean, El Sayed's lead is 33,000. It was up 37,000 about 20 minutes ago. So it's diminished a little bit. But Mallory McMorrow has got 46,000 votes. She's been off the ballot for a while. She walked us. Well, I'm not quite sure what that is. Is that a protest vote? Is that people who didn't know she was off the ballot? Her name's on the ballot, but she's been out of the race for longer than people have been voting. So that's kind of interesting. But here we go. 76% of the vote is in. El Sayed has got almost 50% of the vote. This has been sort of hanging around that way for a while. Again, we're still looking for most of the outstanding vote. There's 4 counties that haven't reported, but they're all very, very small counties. We're still looking for most of what's happening in Wayne County. 63% of the vote is in. The lead is 14,000, so it's 52 to about 45%. There's some sense, and I know Eugene's been talking to those folks, there's some sense that that's not enough of a lead, but there is still enough outstanding vote here for her to make it up. I just want to show you, there's 368,000 votes outstanding, so 10 times what, more than 10 times what El Sayed's lead is. So this is still going to be a while.
Ali Velshi, do not go anywhere. We will be getting right back to you, my friend. We are still awaiting the speech from Abdul El Sayed to his supporters. We expect that to happen very shortly, a live look there. We will bring that to you the second that it happens. El Sayed maintains a slight lead as the votes are still being counted in Michigan's Democratic Senate primary. Stay with us as we continue our MS Now primary coverage. We'll be right back.
Turns out it takes a long time to count some votes in Michigan. It's a big state. But I will tell you this. I want you just to reflect on what that means. Right now, we are on track to vastly outvote the historical numbers that we should have expected. And that tells you about the kind of movement that we were able to inspire. A movement that kicked off 15 months ago, traveling this state up and down, spending time in churches in Detroit and living rooms in Lansing, VFW halls in Escanaba, backyards in Grand Rapids, sometimes in rooms of 2 or 3, sometimes in rooms of 2,000 or 3,000. And across that movement that we built, there was an inspiration in the idea that we could take our government back. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people, instead of government of the corporations, by the special interests, and for the billionaires. And because you had the audacity to believe in that, you know that the billionaires, the corporations, and the special interests, they weren't going to give up lightly. We all knew they were going to spend their money. We didn't know they were going to spend $70 million of their money. We didn't know that they were going to outspend us $11 to $1. And yet we're still standing. They want to tell us that here in Michigan, we're a purple state. That somehow everybody walks around wondering, I wonder where I stand on a left-right spectrum. When really, up and down the state, what you hear is, I wonder how I can afford my rent. I wonder how I can afford my groceries. I don't know what'll happen if I get sick because I can't afford my deductible. We are not a purple state. We are a state in need of a movement to take our politics back. And despite their spending, despite their lies, told in ad after ad after ad after ad on TV, we're walking into the rest of this evening with a 3-point lead. And so as folks ask, if and when we win this race, how are you going to beat Mike Rogers and their money? I want you to remind them that if we come through this, when we come through this, inshallah, that will have taken $70 million on the chin and kept fighting back. But I also want to speak to this moment. We've got 13 weeks to defeat Mike Rogers. And however we might feel about the campaign we've just come through, I want you to understand that it pales in comparison to the cynicism, in comparison to the corporatism, in comparison to the lies that Mike Rogers and Donald Trump are going to tell. There is so much more that unites us. However much we might disagree with our Democratic opponent, there is so much more that unites us than divides us. And so to all of our supporters here tonight, watching on TV, tomorrow we begin to mend fences. Whatever happens tonight, we have a responsibility to assure that we unite to make sure that Mike Rogers never sees the inside of the U.S. Senate. And I'm going to ask, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to ask all of us, as we think about where we go from here, always magnanimity in victory. So if your instinct is to be like, I told you, no. Let's come together to build a movement that's even bigger, that's even stronger, that's even more powerful, that reaches into the very depths of this state, that reminds us the best of who we are and who we can be. That is the commitment I want all of us to be making as we leave here tonight. And so, Mike, and I know you're listening, Mike, we are coming for you. I just gotta tell you, I was in med school while Mike Rogers was in Congress. This is a guy who's never seen a check from a pharmaceutical lobbyist he didn't want to cash. He sent our campaign a cease and desist for calling him a pharma lobbyist. But I don't know if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, smells like a duck. How am I supposed to know it's a goose? So look, forgive me, Mike. I just know that you spend so much time with pharma lobbyists, I just thought you were one. You've taken so much money for them to raise our prescription drug prices. I just thought that you just got into business. After all, you haven't really explained how you made $14 million golfing in Florida. Unless it was trading on all the government relationships you built when you were in Congress. So I don't know, maybe 14 million wasn't enough. You got to come back, get some more relationships and trade on them too? This is a guy who has never seen a check from a corporation he did not want to corrupt himself with. And here's the thing about it. He can't decide which era of Republican he wants to be from. On the one hand, he was from the neocon era that had us fighting unnecessary wars in Iraq, swore up and down he could never support Donald Trump, then went to Mar-a-Lago when he decided to run for Senate the first time, and licked all the boots until he finally got that Trump endorsement. So he's both the worst of the neocon era and the worst of the MAGA era, and I just think that's the worst of all. Because at least you should know who you are. But I promise you, Mike, by the time we are done with you, all of Michigan is going to know who you are. corporate sellout, who's not a pharma lobbyist but really, really might want to be one someday, who voted to raise our prescription drug prices, who supported wars we don't need to fight, who tried to shut down our bridges, who wants to stand in the way of our unions, who should never see the inside of the U.S. Senate. So, friends, we're going to have to wait a little longer to see the outcome of this race. But as I look in front of me, I already see the outcome of this campaign. A community of people who came together around a set of ideals, built on the foundation of what this government was supposed to be in the first place. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And as I think about where we sit in the long arc of our history, it's hard not to reflect on the fact that we just commemorated 250 years. And we all know those 250 years weren't perfect. We all know that a lot of that history was built on a set of foundational errors. And at the same time, I can't help but appreciate the fact that I know what America gave me. America is an incredible place. I used to live the contrapositive of the life I was supposed to live when I spent summers in Egypt. I crossed 15 hours and 10 years difference in life expectancy. But for the accident of being born here, I got the opportunity to get vaccinated against diseases that killed 2 of my aunts and uncles I otherwise never met. I got to go to amazing public schools. I got to go to an incredible public university. I got my medical education paid for by the NIH. And at the same time, growing up just 15 minutes away from me, children whose families had been here far longer than mine, who never got those same opportunities. America can do glorious things, but to love America isn't just to dress up in some colors and pretend that everything's fine. To love America is to will America to do the hard work of being better. If you love America, you want America to be America for all of her kids. And as I think about those past 250 years, those errors, slavery, Jim Crow, the fact that this country was built without giving women equal access to citizenship for years, continued discrimination against people. The thing our country has always done better than anyone else is that we've been able to look those failures in the eye and correct them. It's not because we ignore our challenges. The greatness of America is the ability to see those challenges and fix them. And 250 years on, as we think about where we go from here, it is that ability to correct that we together have embraced in this movement. We live in an era of historical inequality, in an era where union participation is near an all-time low, but the number of billionaires has never been higher. An era where schools continue to carry the consequences of historical segregation. An era where we continue to see a few very small people try to define America as being as small as they are. We can't control the past 250 years. What we can do is build the next 250. And to do that, it's going to mean movements like this one, of the people, by the people, and for the people, with a distinct purpose of taking on the challenges that we face. Those movements have never been more important than they are right now. I look in front of me and I see all kinds of colors, all kinds of stories coming together around the idea that we can have nice things, we just can't do it alone. That to have them, we're going to need to reach across the divides they tell us we can't breach. Divides of race, of faith, of geography, of sexual orientation, gender identity, to build together what we want to hand off to our kids and our grandkids. And for the past 15 months, I've had the privilege of being a part of that movement with all of you. And so as we continue forward, for the next 13 weeks, I am asking you to put your shoulder in the work to make sure that we defeat Mike Rogers, we defeat and send a blow to Trumpism, and we do the work of building that next 250 years that all of us deserve, because at some point, whether you know them or you don't, the future will ask you, what did you do in this moment? For me, it looks like two little girls, ethnically half Indian like their mom, ethnically half Egyptian like me, 100% American. And I want to tell them, when they ask, that I got to work with so many incredible people who believed in the best of America, so that we could hand it off to them and all of their kids and grandkids. Ask yourself what we could be if we treated all our kids like they were all our kids. Ask yourself what it would mean when it comes to where we spend our tax dollars, about the schools we build, the health care we provide, the opportunities we would want. And for the next 13 weeks and the next 6 years after that, I'm asking you to join me in helping to build that America. So with that, we should know who the victor will be tomorrow. And the work starts anew. And so for one last time for this primary, money out of? Money in your? Medicare for? Let's go win. Much.
Abdul Al-Sayed ending his speech as he is addressing his supporters in Detroit, sounding very general election-y, like he's shifted, but we still have a lot of votes to look at today. The Michigan Senate primary still has not been called, but Al-Sayed holds a slight lead. As he's been talking, it's been dropping shorter and shorter. A short time ago, his opponent, Haley Stevens, predicted a long night ahead. He did the same thing. Let's bring in Ali Vitale at Stevens election night headquarters in Detroit, and Chris Jansing. She is live from Al-Sayed's election night headquarters, also in Detroit. Chris, I want to start with you. I talked to a lot of people who are worried that no matter what happened tonight, that Al-Sayed may not be able to talk in a unifying way. He did exactly that. But also, more importantly, he kind of shifted to the general election for a lot longer than Haley Stevens did. What was your reading of the speech? You're in the room.
Yeah, let me see three observations, and I think you really hit on the highlights, but he doesn't use the word campaign, he uses the word movement. He believes, as the people in this room believe, that there's something bigger here, that in many ways it's going back to the roots of the Democratic Party, where you put the working people first. So that's critical. I'm going to step aside a little. I know you can see this, but if it's possible, this crowd that heard him speak was the biggest crowd that we saw over the 6 hours that I have been inside this room. And you heard their enthusiasm. Many of these are the people who have gone out for him, knocked on doors for him. So that's the second thing. And the third that you touched on, this sounded an awful lot like an acceptance speech. He acknowledged that the final results have yet to come in. But I can tell you, spending a lot of time with him over the last 48, 72 hours, and watching the way he works and having conversations as well as interviews with him, he lights up two different ways. One, when he talks about the movement, and the second way is when he's going after Mike Rogers. He is literally burning to go after this guy. He calls him a generationally bad candidate. He said to me at one point today when we were out at the Eastern Market that he has less personality than this floor, which was a concrete floor in an open-air market. And he has challenged him to 5 debates. He predicted to me today that if he won tonight, he would beat Mike Rogers by 7 points. Now, I mean, he just is burning to have this fight and burning to grow this movement. And I think it's also going to be a reflection of whether or not money, and he said 60 million. Actually, our calculation is that more than $80 million was put into Haley Stevens' campaign, most of it by special interests, most of it by PACs, compared to a fraction of that for him. But he really believed that organizing and messaging could win. So we'll see. It's going to be a very, very early morning.
Chris Jansing in Detroit with Abdul Al-Sayed. Ali Vitale, you're there at Haley Stevens, I imagine a little bit quieter of a room as things have been winding down. She also had a speech, and her speech a little shorter, but she also went after Mike Rogers just a little bit. Talk about what you have read from in the room, and more importantly, what has the campaign been telling you?
Look, I think that we saw Stevens pivot to the general election in a way that once again highlights, Eugene, the difference between these candidates as messengers. The message was the same. Democrats need to unify and get in the game to beat Mike Rogers. But the ways in which they would do that are different. I mean, you heard the jabs that Abdul Al-Sayed was already taking. For Stevens, she pivoted to policy differences. She looked at things like affordability and health care as things that she would press him on. And I think that just underscores once again the ways in which these candidates are so different. And that is also the thing that I think I'm going to think about as we go into tomorrow, the ways that Haley Stevens had just come through 2 weeks of pretty tough narratives and news cycles for her. There were polls that were being leaked that showed Al-Sayed up by massive margins. And I think one of the things that we'll be grappling with tomorrow as the sun comes up and hopefully these ballots finish being counted is what does it say that this primary was so close that no one ran away with it, and that there's clearly, you know, between 47 and 49% of healing to be done on either side of this equation. And so it's important that these candidates pivoted to the general, certainly, but also the ways that both of them, again, in different ways, talked about the need to unify behind the ultimate nominee. Because when I was talking to our colleague Rachel Maddow earlier, she asked the question about what does unifying look like and is there nervousness around that? And I know that the thing that I have heard consistently, whether it's from Al-Sayed supporters or from Stevens supporters, is that they are worried about the other team getting behind their candidate. And I think that makes the Thursday and Friday unity meals that the Democratic Party here in Michigan are going to do so important. It also means there's going to be a fair degree of awkwardness there because this primary was so intense. But I think that is the attempt that these candidates are trying to make, is to turn the page at a moment where we don't know what the last sentence of the chapter is going to be. I think one thing is for certain. When Haley Stevens said, get some sleep, get some coffee, I am 100% doing both of those things before morning show tomorrow. Today.
Today, exactly. Case in point. Right.
Ali Vitale closing down the club for us, and Chris Jansing, who I think is going to be out a little bit later. But thank you both for joining us. We appreciate you. Let's bring in MS Now political director Shawna Thomas. Shawna, good morning.
Good morning.
So
I'm here. I'm awake.
I see you taking some copious notes over there. We've got 81% of the votes in. There is now a 1.8% spread between these two people.
Yeah.
What are your takeaways from those speeches, and what should we be watching? What and where are you watching right now?
I think my takeaway from the speeches is very similar to what Chris and Ali said, and great work by both of them, especially over the course of the last couple of days. I was listening for togetherness. Right. Even though neither of those candidates knows who is going to win, if they were going to start the process that the entire Democratic Party, whether I think we're talking progressives or otherwise, are looking for, because even as Al-Sayed said during his speech, 13 weeks for them to defeat Mike Rogers. 13 weeks to try to bring these different factions of the party that who are basically in a dead heat, come together and figure out, can they keep this Senate seat blue? And I don't have to tell any of you how important it is for the Democrats to do that if they want a chance of flipping the Senate. They need to keep the seats that they currently have. So I was listening for that togetherness, and as well as those attacks on Mike Rogers, which were kind of similar from both of them. But I at least heard lip service to the idea of coming together no matter who wins. And, you know, I was also listening much earlier in the night. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who is running to be the next governor, she also made a point at the end of her speech of saying, like, we've got to come together. We've got to figure this out. And as Ali pointed out as well, we expect some kind of unity rally on Friday, not just with the candidates. And I think everyone will wait to see if both of these candidates show up, no matter who wins, but also possibly outside people coming in to just show that everyone is rallying around whomever Michigan decides to send to the rest of this race. I think in terms of what we're watching, let's look at the numbers again. And the audience can't see this, but Wayne County up. Wayne County, it's where Detroit is. They count incredibly slowly, which is part of why we are here right now at this moment on this network. We're waiting to see how that plays out. I think there were a lot of people who expected Haley Stevens to kind of run up the numbers in Wayne County. It's not necessary. She's not necessarily running them up. I believe she is still up, but that is the county everyone is going to keep watching as we get to 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, because it is incredibly difficult to call a race in Michigan without knowing how Wayne County is going. And right now they're close. I think
she's up by 7%.
There is right now 1.8% separating Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens overall in Michigan. And so every time we get another ballot drop from Wayne County, it is going to affect that, and everyone is going to keep watching that very, very closely.
You know, as Dr. El-Sayed was speaking, when he came out, Eugene through to the doctor speaking, his lead was 2.6%, or 2.6 percentage points. By the time he finished, it was at 1.8, and that's where it's been this entire time. And I focus on that because, you know, he's talking about a movement, but can you have a movement? Let's say he wins. Can you have a movement with a 1-point-something percentage point victory?
Not if you can't bring everybody together.
Exactly. And so I mean, maybe you talked about this a moment ago, but talk about how difficult is it going to be for the Democratic nominee, no matter who it is, to beat Mike Rogers? Because, I mean, Eugene and Jackie know I've been all about Maine and Susan Collins, and she's a formidable candidate. But former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers is going to be a formidable candidate.
Yes, and he is a known commodity in Michigan. He ran in the last election. He didn't lose by all that much. And so...
Been unopposed for months,
and
defining himself.
And we know that Dr. El-Sayed likes to talk about how much money came into this primary race, how much outside money, how much AIPAC money, but also other organizations. Mike Rogers is going to have a lot of money to play with.
Yeah.
And the Republicans, as much as the Democrats want to keep the seat, the Republicans want to flip it, and they see an opportunity there. And we've had previews of how they're going to run basically against all Democrats.
Right.
Basically calling them all progressives. They're going to use the Democratic Socialist label, even if El-Sayed isn't a Democratic Socialist or Haley Stevens isn't. But that's how they're going to run. And they think that that's going to work. And they're going to have to figure out how they combat that.
A lot of money to play with, and I am told that Republicans are expecting a lot more money to come in if El-Sayed wins the primary. And also, Shauna, your point about time being of the essence, I mean, that was the biggest takeaway from Republicans' loss of Mike Rogers to Haley Stevens last time around, and why Trump endorsed him in July of last year.
Alyssa Slotkin.
Thank you so much for all these. Sorry, Alyssa Slotkin, for all of these very smart points. We appreciate it. As you saw just a short time ago, Michigan Democratic Senate candidate Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens addressed their supporters at their respective headquarters in Detroit, allowing their supporters to head home and hopefully get some rest. The race remains very close. We'll go to Ali Velshi at the big board after a quick break. Please stick with us.
let's head straight to Ali Velshi at the big board. Ali, as we were watching Abdul Al-Sayed speak, what we saw were his numbers go from 2.6 to 1.8. I'm not sure what they are now. Where were those votes coming from?
Okay, so we're 83% in, and his lead, again, when we were talking maybe an hour ago, he had a 37,000 point lead. It's now down to 22,000. And take a look at this. Mallory McMorrow is above 51,000. We had a bunch of votes come in a few areas. Muskegon County came in. It went from no votes to 99% in. Haley Stevens got a lead there, but again, it's a 1,500 vote lead. It's not serious, but look at Genesee County. Only 59% of the vote is in there. She's got a lead there, so she's got an opportunity to pick up some more votes there. Oakland County, where she's from, is all in. She's got a 16,000 vote lead there, but take a look at this. She's got 52% to his 45. This is where she's from, so that should be a bigger lead. And of course, we got more vote in Wayne County. We're up to 69% here, but this is what we all knew was going to happen, right? We knew this isn't going to be decided until we know what happens in Wayne. She's got a 15,000 point lead in Wayne County, but again, it's 52 to 44. She's got to take all the remaining votes at a proportion that's greater than that. It's got to do better. 52 to 44 won't do it for her. 45. Now let's talk about what's left in the state. There are 250,000 votes remaining. So Abdul Al-Sayed's lead, there's 10 times that is outstanding. It becomes harder to see where it is he's going to pick these votes up from, but in the areas that she's done well, particularly the rural areas, everything that's in a lighter blue, that's Haley Stevens. There's not a lot, like in these places, there's just not a lot left. There's 91% in here, and it was only a couple of thousand votes. So she's got to get votes in population centers. Flint would be one of them that she could possibly do well in, but there's a bunch of these places that are closer to the south. Eaton County's mostly, but Ingham County, 61% in. Look at his performance there, 63 to 32. So he'll build votes back up in those places, and that's why this is going to be a late night, because every 10 minutes the direction switches on this race. Again, 84% in, and now he's below 20,000 in a lead. So right now it looks and feels like Abdul Al-Sayed is losing his momentum, but again, there are some places we're just not seeing vote from. Mostly it's Wayne County, and generally speaking, Wayne County supporters or Wayne County votes are going to favor Haley Stevens. The other question is whether the remaining vote is advance voting, which seems to be favoring Haley Stevens, or day of voting, which seems to be favoring Abdul Al-Sayed. So it's a guess.
Ali, can you step back from the map for just that white square? There's no
Gladwin County.
What is what's taking them so long?
That's a good question. There were about 5 counties that didn't have vote until now, and I'm going to look into why Gladwin County is, because I just realized there was one square that isn't filled. But these are all, take a look at the populations in these ones, right? These are, as you get closer south, you get bigger population, but generally speaking, these are places with a few thousand votes. So if you look at the pattern, this is probably going to favor Haley Stevens, just given how that block is voting, but probably not enough to make a major difference.
All right, Ali Velshi, thank you. At the big board, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Stay with MS Now as we continue our coverage of this very big night in the midterm election cycle, as Democrats try to win back the House and Senate to bring some accountability to President Trump in his final 2 years in office. More after a quick break.
Still no call in the Michigan Democratic Senate primary between Abdul Al-Sayed and Haley Stevens. Both candidates predicted a long night and sent their supporters home. We're going to bring in Zach Stanton, MS Now Deputy Managing Editor of News, Basil Smikle, MS Now political analyst and professor of practice at Columbia University, and Susan Del Percio, MS Now political analyst and Republican strategist. Susan, I know you have some burning, fiery thoughts right now, but I do have to go to Zach first with something that I heard from that senior Trump campaign strategist, which is their takeaway being that if Abdul Al-Sayed does win this ultimately, between him and Graham Plattner, the dream of taking back the Senate, this is in his words, is going to be an impossible task. And that what Republicans are, well, exactly, but that basically that Troy Jackson does not have a path forward. Obviously, we've heard a lot of Democrats say exactly the opposite. I'm trying to give the Republican point of view right now, though, and that what they're essentially going to do is try to convince Democrats that coming out and turning out for him and voting for him in a general is going to hurt their chances in 2028 because of the way people are going to extrapolate what electability means for 2028. What is your response to this?
I think there are a few things. One is that when you talk to Democrats in the state, one of the things they're consistently worried about is the flood of money that will come into the state if Abdul is the nominee. I've talked with people.
I think it could potentially be the most expensive Senate race in the country. Most expensive.
That would not surprise
race.
me. And if you look at the amount of money that AIPAC in particular spent trying to defeat Abdul El-Sayed, it stands to reason that they would pour a significant amount of money, perhaps more, in the general election on Mike Rogers' behalf if Abdul is in fact the nominee. But what you saw from Abdul was a pivot to the general election.
Yeah.
You saw him talk about magnanimity. You saw him talk a lot about Mike Rogers. And that is heartening some Democrats. But at the same time, to me, it's also indicative of a sort of identity crisis for the party in that there's very little holding the disparate coalitions together right now, aside from just negative partisanship, opposition to Donald Trump, opposition to Mike Rogers.
Yeah. You know, Basil, when you heard this, because we're going to keep letting Susan build. Basil, when you heard the speeches from Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens, one was shorter, one was longer, both felt a little bit of a turn to the general election, but did either of them sound like, oh, this is the person where the energy is going to continue going? Because as I've talked to a lot of people, and the point about unity and the concern that's been there, I've heard from folks down in Michigan that say both of them, they were concerned that both of them would not be able to do this. However, voters don't always follow you when you're the leader, right? And you're the candidate. You say, okay, well, now I lost. Now you have to vote for Jonathan. They're not all going to chase him.
Yeah. Well, I remember 2016 when that exact thing did not happen, right? And a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters did not come out and vote for Hillary Clinton. And that is the concern. And Ali Vitale talked about that in her reporting, that 45% has gone one way, 45% another way, or thereabouts. And so, there are a lot of really big factions that are going to have to come on board to the other candidate. And that one candidate is going to have to bring all of them together. This is a coalition that neither of them have really seen. It's kind of new for each of them. And to your point, it's new for the Democratic Party. We're in a place where and I've said this before, the party had been resting on a coalition built during for the Clinton years, right? It's Rainbow Push that Clinton sort of brought in or was pushed into the Clinton framework. And the party had been relying on that for a period of time. But my mentor used to tell me this all the time. Every movement becomes the establishment. And that's what you're hearing now, that coalition, that leadership is now the establishment.
Yeah.
And this new movement is really trying to reform the coalition. So the challenge is that nobody really knows who's going to come out with the winning coalition, and therefore, how do you then pivot quickly to the general election? I think the tie is going to be organized labor. Because you're it's going to be organized labor. That doesn't mean, and there's a separate category I would speak for black voters, but I think the tie is going to be organized labor over things like affordability, particularly healthcare, which we talked about earlier.
All right, Susan, hold forth.
Here we go.
Your thoughts.
Oh, I have so many.
Yes, go right ahead. The floor is yours.
No, I think what's really interesting when you just look at this race as a whole is looking where the DSA or the ultra-progressive, if you want to put El-Sayed in that category, because it's not quite progressive, I think it's the more ultra-progressive, is that this is in fact part of a movement. And maybe El-Sayed is, first of all, too worried about leading a movement instead of running a campaign, because that's kind of what my takeaway was from the speech. And that's, if he does lose, he's going to be focused on a movement. But that movement is something that is new. It's not coalition-based. It's new votes coming in. When we start looking at the race 2 years ago, the Democratic primary, a total of 900,000 votes were cast. Slotkin won with 700,000 votes. Now, whoever loses this race will probably have 700,000 votes. So we're seeing a big pour of new people. But more importantly with this movement is they don't want to join a Democratic coalition. They want to take over the Democratic Party. So they're not going to look to work to build together. They want to change what the party is. And that's where you have to start seeing more of the establishment Democrats. And I learned this from Trump in 2016 into 2017, is the establishment has to have a backbone and push back against it if it doesn't want to be controlled by it.
Yeah. We are going to get back into a lot of this because the panel is sticking with us. They ain't going nowhere. They have nowhere to go. The Michigan Democratic Senate primary remains very close. More after a very quick break. Zach Stanton, Basil Smikle, and Susan Del Percio are back with us on this big primary night with the Democratic Senate primary in Michigan. Still very, very close, but you might not notice, but a lot of people are running today, not just these two. So I wonder what you guys were looking for. Any other surprises? I imagine knowing you that you're still thinking about Michigan.
You do know me well, yes. Michigan's 7th district is one that really comes to mind for me. It is a pickup opportunity for Democrats, represented by Tom Barrett, who's a Republican who has broken with Trump on the Iran war. He's voted several times for the Iran war resolutions to curb Trump's war powers. And a very progressive Democrat, Will Lawrence, won the primary today with 2 moderates dividing the moderate vote in that primary. And to me, it's indicative of what we're seeing in Michigan, which is like, you know, there are some elections that are just a billboard where it's a clear takeaway, and there are others that are more an ink blot, where people are just going to project onto it whatever they want. And I feel like there's something for everyone in Michigan today.
Yeah, very good. Susan?
I'm actually watching Virginia a bit because if you remember, those lines were drawn and then there was a battle, and now they're finally having their primaries. And it's going to be very interesting to see how that shakes up because there is so much incumbent against incumbent going on there. And basically what the turnout is for so much money being put into the overall effort and how that goes.
And Basil, you've got an excellent point to make about the thing you're watching in this election.
And before I make that excellent point, I have one point that I do want to make. If Stevens wins, it'll largely be because of black voters. But you got to go to a black church or a black something the very next day, because that's very important to the coalitions going forward and to DSA victories going forward. 2 other quick things. Donald Trump's candidates won tonight. And that's actually an important statement because he has still strong control over his party. And that is going to be an interesting telltale sign going into the November midterms. And to go to the glasses tonight, Missouri's 5th district, another Trump-backed candidate, Rick Bratton, won the primary against Representative Emanuel Cleaver. Now, Emanuel Cleaver has been in office a long time, 30 years. But his race and the dynamic there is indicative of what Democrats face going forward. That district has been redrawn. His fairly safe district is now going into Republican rural areas, and he will have to campaign for that. And a lot of people don't think he'll be able to hang on to that seat. But if Democrats overperform, they can protect many more seats than they'll likely use.
And on this point, what does that say about other black members of Congress running in redrawn districts, the impact that could have on not just the Congressional Black Caucus, but on black representation in the House of Representatives?
We would see a massive drop, we could potentially see a massive drop in black representation since before the Voting Rights Act, number one. 65. And number 2, in this conversation about progressive candidates and concerns about the durability of our institutions, it also suggests that that black power, not just in Congress, but also in civic life, would be substantially damaged. And that is a thing that nobody is talking about right now.
There is a race that we have not talked about tonight that, Eugene, I want to ask you about because I know you were covering it more closely than any of us, and that is the Cori Bush versus Wesley Bell race. That he, despite some of the anti-incumbency threads that we're seeing tonight, that he handily won. There was a lot of AIPAC spending, but at the same time, a very smart reporter pointed out to me that that outcome could also be indicative and potentially forecasting of the fact that corruption is going to play really well in all elections going forward. Cori Bush faced intense scrutiny when she was in Congress last time around for an investigation into campaign spending.
Yeah, Cori Bush was telling people she wanted to go back to Congress. This was a test of whether or not they actually wanted her to come back, whether they felt like she was someone who represented them well. And I think at the end of the day, they said no. I think the answer was
no.
Very clearly no. And I think, I talked to some folks from her campaign earlier on today, and they felt good. And so I think some of them are very surprised this morning about how this shook out. And that tells me that some folks, even when they're running, even when they say we got this, they're not always paying attention to the voters. And this is the thing about these nights.
That was Beall too. He really he's been on really on top of his game, serving the constituency there. So that's really, it goes down to candidates and electeds.
Exactly.
But Jonathan, just because we're out of time, you get the last word on what your biggest takeaway of the night has been.
Well, still, I guess my biggest takeaway is that we still don't know what all these races mean for the Democratic Party going into the general election. That folks saying that it's all anti-establishment and it's all DSA. Well, Wesley Bell, Congressman Bell, he's a congressman, he's an incumbent. And he won. And tonight, we're still waiting to see. Abdul El-Sayed, Dr. El-Sayed is still 1.8 percentage points ahead of Congresswoman Haley Stevens. The fact that this race is closer than the polls showed us going into says to me that the Democrats are figuring it out, race by race.
That's right.
TBD. Zach Stanton, Basil Smikle, Susan Del Percio, thank you so much for spending the evening with us and staying up very late. Stay close. More of our MS Now special election coverage after a very quick break.
Guys, my biggest takeaway tonight is at the end of the day, the voters are always going to get their say. They get the final say. And no matter what the polls end up saying, we're going to have to figure out the polling here in this country. But at the end of tonight, when we have an answer here, this party, the Democratic Party, can't glean all the things they want to glean from each one of these races.
Right. And I would also say something I say every election night, that forget about the polls. The most important thing to come is the result, the actual votes of voters. And that it's important for us in the media, but also folks in politics, to have a sense of humility, that we don't know and won't know what people think about candidates, about issues, until they go into that voting booth, the privacy of the voting booth, the sanctity of the voting booth, and click the lever, punch the hole, fill in the circle for the candidate that they want.
I'm going to be mindful of the clock and just say no notes. But we will be counting the Wayne County votes very closely. Right. And that is our coverage for this hour. Thank you so much for joining us. Jonathan, Eugene, and I will see you again Saturday morning on the weekend at 7 a.m. Eastern. Stick with MS Now as we continue our coverage of the battle for control of Congress.